the original Burning Crusade, where the Warlocks had one button. They just spammed Shadow Ball with, like, pet. They didn't even have a pet. They just spammed Shadow Ball, which would crit for billion-y damage. And as soon as progress was over, the top players all abandoned ship on Warlocks almost immediately because it was so boring. It was just like, yeah, we get it. We do the top DPS, but it's so boring. Like, we're going into deep math as to whether casting Immolate is worth it or not. Like, that's what the discussions were at the time, and I'm not familiar with TBC Classic, so whether it's changed or not, I don't know. But that was the sentiment at the time, where everybody had to reroll Warlocks for some well, and then everybody wanted to abandon them immediately. Like, it was just so boring. And the way, if you don't know, if you're not keeping up with this, the way the Warrior played at the end of Season 1, at least when I played, and still traverses into today, was a mechanic from runes where you basically ramp up your rage to above 80 rage, and then you gain N rage for 9 attacks or something, or 10 attacks. And then what you do is you play this game with your rage bar where you go above 80 rage, and then you spend a bit, but you need to get back over 80 in rage, 80 rage, before the enrage buff runs out. Because while you're enraged, you can use Raging Blow, you can spend a little bit, and you have this huge damage buff. But essentially, that's the gameplay, is like just watching a rage bar and go like, oh, 90, spend a bit, go to 70, 8 or whatever, white hit, back above 80, get the buff back up. And you kind of just play this pendulum swing backwards and forwards. And it's really boring. It's like so boring. Because you're like, I want to press execute and I can't. And people are like, yeah, but your damage is really good. I don't care. This is so boring to play. I really don't care. But seeing that was a real, like, PTSD eye-opener for me. Anyway, coming back, I was hoping that Warriors would get more fun skills, heroic leaps, blade storms, things like that. I want to be clear as I'm recording this, I haven't picked up a single rune yet. And I don't know what any of the new runes in Season of Discovery do. And as a reminder, if you are looking for your runes and you're not just Googling them, on our website, it's been sent everywhere. I know thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people have been checking them out. But all the runes with just clues as to where to get them and not what they do. Everything is a mystery, but there's a little clue, a little pointer, and it was really nice to see the head of WoW Classic, the head developer of WoW Classic, actually like retweet and put that out there for people to see. So very cool. That little project for Bex. It's all Bex's work, nothing to do with me, who's been working on that. So shout outs to her. So coming back to Season of Discovery then, one, I wish they'd stop releasing this on like a Friday, or a Thursday anyway, because it means I don't get to play at the weekend, because I have my family at weekend. But either way, dove right in, and I was immediately like, okay, the focus is leveling, because they've probably moved the runes a little bit later down the line. It's like Scarlet Monastery and some of the level 30 plus zones. That makes sense to me, so we're going to have some fun here. And my immediate thought was, I'm going to enjoy this as much as possible. That's how I look at Season of Discovery, is how can I have the most fun here? One, I'm Alliance, which I haven't done in like 15 years. So where would I go? And I was like, you know what? I want to go to Duskwood. I loved Duskwood. Duskwood was the first time ever, all the way back in beta classic vanilla World of Warcraft, all that time ago, that scared me to death, because I remember walking out of Westfall and traversing the bridge and the color of the zone changing from green to yellow. And the music changing and the atmosphere changing, because Blizzard does that thing when you cross a zone where all the color textures change and it's a very different environment. And I was like, whoa. Whoa. Like, it scared me a little bit. I was like, what's this mean? Because I didn't really know what it meant. I was like, am I going to have to start fighting in open world now? Is this where I'm going to start meeting the Horde? Because I was Alliance. Etc, etc. And it scared me to death, and I had really fond memories of it. Duskwood sucks. Again, the nostalgia just ripped away from me. All the rose that was tinted my glasses has been washed away, because it's just so much back and forth and just like the same quests. It's like a chain quest in the same area over and over again. You could tell this is like the most basic of basic WoW leveling ever. It's like, well, we've got these like 4 areas. We're going to lock off the entire middle of the zone for something later, which would be the Emerald Dragons. And what we're going to do is just have you run backwards and forwards, basically going to the same 4 areas over and over again. Yeah, that's Duskwood in a nutshell. And I was like, oh, it does have the event with Stitches, which is great. But other than that, Duskwood kind of sucks now. My memory has been spoiled. So I did a couple of levels there, and then I was like, I need to do something else. Let's go and do a dungeon. So Stockades was the choice. Some guys wanted to do the stockades. Did 2 quick runs in there, which was great for leveling. Super fun. Got to play with some very high-geared people from our guild. We have a guild called Family, who had continued to raid throughout Season 1, so they had very epic gear, and we were just clearing the whole place to death. Wonderful. And then it was like, oh, you know what we should do, because they're giving bonus XP, you should do the raid. Now, I do regret this, because I think I had to go to New Zealand for the grinding gear for Path of Exile's ExileCon, when Season of Discovery was kind of getting to that point where we were all raiding. So I only ever did Blackfathom Deeps once. And we got to the Warlock boss. This is before people knew how to kind of cheese it, and we didn't kill it. We had like 4 goes, I think, before the end of the day, and did not kill it. So that was my limit of where I got to at that point. Obviously not expecting to wipe this time, because 1, we're a couple of levels higher than the raid. That's fair to say, and there were several people there who were fully geared from the raid and had vast experience. What I didn't expect is like, oh, yeah, people discovered the free action potion. And I was like, that's really clever, because the debuff that wipes you out in Phase 3 requires you to be slowed, and if you have free action potion, it doesn't land on you at all. It just doesn't work. And I was like, oh, okay. So I picked one of those up from the auction house, and off I went on my merry way to do the raid. Gotta say, was a little disappointed in the last boss. Just a breath and nothing much else going on. A couple of debuffs and a couple of ads. That was it. That was all that was going on there. It definitely felt to me like the main boss was the second to last boss, the Warlock boss. Like, the number output required is there for the final boss, Akumai. But overall, yeah, you know, the raid itself I actually think was really good. I would actually say that I thought the last boss was kind of the weakest boss, besides the Naga, who you could just kind of zerg down. Everything else, the turtle was more interesting. I actually think the bubble boss at the beginning is more interesting. The march of the Murlocs is more interesting. The gauntlet is more interesting. Although, again, it's always fun to see on farm how people have just, like, started to ignore mechanics. Our first kill of the gauntlet had us killing every single totem immediately, and that fight went on for a while, but now it's like, just ignore everything except this one. It's fine. And we'll just whack the lightning totem. Just kill everything else. Kill the boss, and it's fine to move on. Always the way with World of Warcraft, and always fun to see. But moving on, getting to the Warlock boss and the free action potion, I was like, okay. This is kind of goofy. But the last boss, yeah, it was like, watch the breath. I'm like, okay. I mean, not the biggest difficulty for me, as you can imagine, to get around that, but still fun nonetheless. And lots of XP to rock up there. My plan going forward, Season of Discovery, now I will have some time next week in order to actually push, is to... I've made a kind of decision. Far too often, there are so many things going on now that I'm more variety-based, that not only do we have a lot of things we want to do, like we have PoE Ubers coming up, we have Dawn Trail coming up, we've got War Within Alpha coming up, which we'll be covering mostly over here, by the way, the War Within Alpha, on this channel, is that every time we kind of get involved in something kind of comes up. It's like, well, this is kind of a new priority. What I've decided is, when it comes to MMO stuff, is I want to finish out my character before I move on, because I always, like, leave things hanging. I have done for the last 12 months, it's just got to sort of leave things dangling. And I want to just change that around. So I don't think we'll be leaving Season Discovery until we've, like, cleared the raid, maybe even a couple of times. Character's pretty rock solid, ready for Season 3, whenever that comes, and that's when we're going to put it down. So for now, I'm going to enjoy the leveling process, and probably at some point in my next play session, we'll start looking at the runes, and I'll come back and give you a review of those. But so far, so good. It has basically been classic leveling, but obviously with the augments from Season 1, which makes leveling more fun in general. So where I'm going to go next, I don't know. Maybe Thousand Needles, maybe a little bit of Stranglethorn, stuff like that. Those are the zones I'm excited for to revisit and enjoy. I don't really want to do Ashenvale again, because I did quite a bit of that last time, and in Hardcore. So we're going to do Hardcore again in the future. So there we are in Season 1. I hope you guys are enjoying it, and I'll be back in the next day or so with some more updates for you. So be good. Bye-bye.
Rav messaged me yesterday, and he said this is one of his best videos he's done in terms of, like, organic, natural, sick-ass content. Full natty bro. You know what I mean? All right, sit back, relax, and enjoy. We got Rav the Avatar versus Season of Discovery Phase 2. I can't wait.
Attention gamers. Previously on my
it's been too long since I've seen a Rav video, man. Attention gamers.
Season of Discovery Adventures, I started my journey as an undead rogue and enjoyed the experience of playing a new version of WoW on release. I enjoyed how alive the low-level world felt doing dungeons with the boys in my book club, losing crucial roles, and getting a bit too into the life of rogue RPing. I killed a goblin at the top of a watchtower which let me put rabies on my daggers, and then I teamed up with a guild full of degenerates to be the first on the server to clear the Black Fathom depths before raid logging for the next 16 eternities in preparation for Phase 2.
Yeah, that's pretty much World of Warcraft in a nutshell.
Okay, I'd like to start by addressing the twerking elephant in the room because you may notice I don't exactly look like the stealthing. Stab at it.
Wait, Rav's on
Spawn
a Shadow
camping.
Priest now?
Savage Rogue I rolled in Phase 1, and that's because I discovered the priest. Something about the eternal struggle you are given between good and evil just felt so relatable. On one end you can yield the power of light, for example when you are waiting for one of those floating gazebos to take you to the land of the promoted cows and some tabbed out idiot has a case of the Mondays in front of you. You can be the almighty hero and bring him back to
Raise
life.
him up, yeah. Rav, just be honest to your audience and tell them you rolled priest because it's disgustingly overpowered. Come on, let's cut the crap. Just say I rolled priest because they're overtuned and they one-shot everything in PvP and I'm invincible and they're really good.
In other totally not staged scenarios where a max level warlock is running away one shot from a grey mob, asking for help after you've already healed him like this is porno shoot Calibur acting, only to then show his appreciation by trading you all his gold just like you scripted the scene out, you may start to lean towards the light. People recognize you and bow before you as you are fishing. They see a trustworthy priest who has chosen good over evil and kneeling and praying together bestows buffs on each other. The light means you are a buffer, a bubbler, a healer, a true team player. Which is why I chose to go full shadow.
Yeah,
because
baby.
when it's my turn to buff other bubble bitches I can't resist the urge to leave them on read. When they insist I show off how mature I am by using my character to simulate them singing into my pink karaoke machine until their mom sees what's happening on their game and unplugs their computer. If Blizzard is going to give me a move where performing it incorrectly can actually get myself killed, you already know I'm going to get outplayed by a mage and then deny him the satisfaction of killing me, because I already did it myself. I'd like to introduce you all to Ted, Fred, and Hunter Biden because you are going to see a lot of these knee-nibbling sperm cells, and if you want to heal, you'll just have to ask another priest because I can't cast holy spells in shadow form, and so this is now the journey of Rav the Shadow Avatar.
Yeah.
Which began with getting stuck worse than a stepsister in a hole in Ashenvale.
Are you actually
Yes, this
stuck?
is how it all started and no amount of parkour was going to fix it. I tried attacking local Elwyn hotties hoping they would just put me out of my misery and I could get off my knees and res outside of this proverbial washing machine, but they didn't take the bait. I released Hunter Biden onto the local NPCs, but they bugged out when they saw I was in the Ashenvale black hole.
Oh my God,
I
this
unironically put a disgraceful message in general chat that I'm not proud of, only for this situation to get even more embarrassing when the person
Oh my
who ended up responding to my shameful SOS was named Rav Syndrome. I tell him to bring alliance to me, but the directions are unclear, which is when I realized I could have just hopped out all along.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to tell you, man. Yeah. For spacebar.
Needless to say, I kicked that asshole because I'm a purple pill picker. Kidding, I invited him back, which turned out to be a mistake. You see, when you have two players in a party where the first got stuck in a tree roots asshole for 30 minutes and the second apparently named his character after the first, they aren't exactly a killer combo in PvP.
Oh. Oh no. Shadow or death, nice. Ow.
And after 20 minutes of getting my urethra smoked like a crack pipe, I gave in.
Bro, priests are
Defeated,
OP, Rav.
embarrassed,
What's going on?
and forced to go back to editing a shitty League of Legends video. But this was the turning point in my journey. I prepared for phase 2 like lube prepares you to take it up the ass with all my runes discovered, maxed professions, Michelin star chef status, and no one needed to buy me fish because a man once taught me how, and if you thought I was done there.
I'm a virgin.
That's right, I sat in the Gulch of Warsong for 57 hours grinding reputation so that I could wear a purple quality bracelet at 40, which consisted mostly of RP walking around and a...
Wait a minute, is that why everyone was farming rep? Everyone's like, yo Czar, what's your rep with Warsong? Oh, I didn't... How did I not get this memo? Oh my god, I was playing Dungeonborn. Oh, okay.
But at 40, which consisted mostly of RP walking around and essentially waiting for one of the 20 people in the lobby to capture the flag by himself once one team gave up. A true PvP experience. I had 20 quests completed and more ready to be started in my bags to kick off the phase with just an XP bust a nut festival as I was literally ejaculating sweat out of my grubby gamer fingers. But I wasn't doing this to speedrun to 40 and see how fast I could run out of things to do in this game. No, I was doing this so I could get ahead of the pack for the sole reason of being a grade A unkillable dickhead to every single alliance I ran into, to avenge the events of the Ashenvale slaughter I experienced that night with my supposed disorder by my side.
360. Shadow or death. Yeah. Man, Shadow... Wait, Rav is 38 already? There's no way Rav is a higher level than me. What?
You see, I vowed from that moment on there is not a single alliance I would ever let walk by me without a fight. And while it may look like I was yelling demonic things to these losers as I killed them, from their perspective I was actually giving the best piece of advice I could give. Like this poor level 20 gnome has no idea that he shouldn't be in Ashenvale right now. He should be on step 30 in Red Ridge killing condors. This poor level 23 could be safely leveling if she was following a guide that told her the most optimal place to level while also min-maxing professions along the way. That's because Rested XP is the best leveling guide made for WoW players. By WoW players? Featuring the most optimal routes for all classes, races, genders, you name it, to the point where if you aren't using RXP, you are just wasting your time. Look at this human for example.
Yeah.
A level 25 far from his hometown. If he was using RX,
that was a pretty good ad. Oh, he's still going.
He would know that he would be accomplishing his goals so much better if he was following these straightforward steps in Duskwood. But clearly this guy doesn't respect his own time, so I only have one choice to teach him a lesson. And the one thing most people don't tell you about Rested XP is that you can start using it today completely free. You just go to my link in the description, make a free account on their website, get the add-on, and boom, you won't be getting kicked off ships, you will be speed leveling with ease. That said, with launch coming up, I also needed to make some gold, and in light of Blizzard giving GDKPs the shaft, I had a brilliant plan to make a fortune before the phase. You see, there's a quest in Ashenvale that causes you to plagiarize the work of 12 different authors and hand it in as your own to the teacher, so my devious plan was to control the market for one of these pages, buy it out and then resell it for a 2000% markup. It was a flawless plan, and I could already envision checking my mail and seeing endless fortune. Yeah, this plan failed miserably, so if anyone has a need for 600 copies of specifically page 8, let me know. My launch was going well. I had completed my quests and I was on my way to the Crawl of Razorfin to visit Howard's infected cousins when we came across a group of Stormwind simps, and while I know I vowed to attack every alliance I came across, I was on a strict schedule and I had a fresh world buff, so I had to make a decision. But once we got into the dungeon, we were set up for nothing but smooth sailing, like nothing was going to ruin my record-breaking pace.
He got stuck again, didn't he? Yep. Bro, Rav. There's no way this guy beat me to 40. There's no way. There's no way.
It was at this time where we did one final farewell to the fathom depths of blackness, and just guess what the fuck happened.
Oh, nice. Perfect timing.
That said, I quickly
Rav rolled a 96 and this guy rolls a 100. Oh, that sucks. Oh, that really sucks. That sucks. Family-friendly streamer. That sucks ass. Butt. That sucks butt, man. Oh my god.
That said, I quickly learned that on any fresh launch of WoW, The meta is to elaborately assemble a group of efficient killers and to look at the 10 weeks of content that Blizzard just released and to try as hard as you possibly can to run out of things to do after 10 hours by spamming the same dungeons over and over again so they can race to the raid and flex their parses.
Yep.
And while I bet this makes for incredible content for viewers, I had my own plan, and that was to solo them myself, and the strategy was simple. I would gaslight torture Tommy #1 into thinking his own coworker slept with his girl. I was thinking I hacked the system here until I realized I don't get experience if I make a scarlet shitter do all my work, and besides I didn't want to miss out on the true WoW experience in the open world.
Man, priests, oh my god, priests.
Sure, dungeon spammers may be leveling faster, but you know what they aren't doing? Watching Ted Fred and Hunter Biden fucking knee nibble and Owen Hottie with res sickness to death. Not to mention the open world rivalries that are created during questing. For example, I was just in this Arathi asshole of a cave when I first met good old Lambard. I introduced myself by inflicting pain on him. He asked me to sit still and watch my shadowy sperm cell do work. He whipped out his bitch bubble, so I made like a German car manufacturer and said I'm out. Long story short, round 1 ended with this little chode pally losing a rundown with those little legs, but this would not be the last of Lambard. You see, a few minutes later I finished a kill when I heard him fighting. Sure enough, he killed both Ted and Fred, leaving me with just Hunter Biden and this dude as baggage. But he fled deeper into the cave and would be cornered, which meant only one thing. He runs by mistaking me for a player who gives a fuck, and I call Ted and Fred out for their revenge. To no one's surprise, he's getting shit on worse than a porta potty at a peanut convention, but then an inexplicable emotion overcame me. In the final moments of his life, he was showing compassion to a fellow horde. I opened up my dark heart with remorse, willing to kneel and apologize for my violence, and that's where I learned a lesson. That no alliance will ever earn my trust again.
Oh my gosh, he gets turned on.
I start recruiting some of my homeboys from Brill, briefing them on the mission, as we chase a dumb fight like truly bronzy low League of Legends players, running through the entirety of Jurassic Park, which gets my fresh recruit cucked and pissed off, leaving me to deal with half the mobs in the zone and Lambard too pussy to fight a real 1v1. So even though I escaped his grubby gamer fingers, I succumbed to the mere quest mobs as my nemesis laughed at my demise. I tried to recruit more troops for the cause, but everyone was too busy speed leveling so that they could run out of Phase 2 content before the end of the first day to help me with a personal grudge, but I was too petty to be productive right now. I made a tracking macro to find this piece of shit. I started questioning his allies, agreeing to spare their lives if they tell me his location, and if anyone disobeyed they would have to feel my wrath, and the second one of them fought back, guess who the fuck was right there? I invited every horde in the area, making them think this was just some measly min-maxing group effort of a kill quest, but in reality there was only one mission.
There he is. Get him.
The final battle was on. My recruits could give less than two shits about my petty drama, so my plan quickly turned into running over to them and hoping that they will think any red name is a quest NPC and kill it, and thanks to some quick thinking I had won the war on Lambard. But only with help, and even though I always had a small army to do my bidding, I knew I'd have to get stronger myself. I'd have to discover my strongest rune. Now the whole idea of Season of Discovery is to explore this giant world and find this shit yourself. You know, the true experience where everyone gets crazy excited when you organically find something by surprise because you didn't look it up before.
Paul, come loot this. Paul, come loot this.
No, fucking scroll, dude.
So I chose to stay true to this spirit by taking it upon myself to discover the classic WoW Priest Discord, where I looked up where to find this rune. But let me show you how easy it was to prove that I totally would have figured it out myself.
Yeah, true.
First you go to this super obvious remote location in the shittiest zone that everyone avoids because it sucks ass, where you touch this burnout pile of logs. It's all like find someone who knows about this, and my immediate thought was, Jesus, this is so easy, it's obviously that goblin bibbly out in the middle of nowhere. He says something about the next clue being in a port, so the only logical next step is to take boat to the Bay of Booty, and you should come to know what this means.
Oh, beautiful. Completely
Bitch in Booty Bay
outplayed.
is all like whoa, buy me a drink first. So yeah, really easy to solve that puzzle if you are used to striking out with freeloading women in bars your whole life like me. But she does put out the next clue you perverts, and it's to find a miniature Titanic in bumfuck wetlands, which surprise teleports you to the east coast. Literally cake to follow the clues, and this is where you need to loot something, but there were a bake.
Don't die here. I'm speaking from personal experience. If you die here, the res puts you here. Actually, if you're Horde, it's probably in Hammerfall. I'm Alliance, so it's here. And you have to run all the way around or take res sickness. Trust me.
The east coast. Literally cake to follow the clues, and this is where you need to loot something, but there were a baker's dozen alliance, and I'd have to put my trust in their kindness if I were to get my rune.
Rav, don't die. Rav, don't die. Oh no. Oh no. Rav, no, Rav, no, don't. You're gonna have to run back. Seriously, whatever you do not die over here.
Turns out the closest graveyard is in an entirely different tax code, and you have to take res sickness, which meant 20 minutes of my life were just wasted, and another innocent bystander was going to have to pay for the Alliance's sins.
Mind control.
Does swallow marsh.
Alright. That's so brutal.
Is that on this side of the world?
Man,
anyways, find the
so
sexy
annoying.
elf on the shelf, kill her, loot her coin purse, use it to open the jewelry box on the dock, and you have your rune that I totally would have been able to discover all by myself, and just look at its beauty. But where were we? Oh yes, the adventures of open world questing and
what was that rune? It was a frostbolt or something? What the heck was that?
But where were we? Oh yes, the adventures of open world questing and
okay.
NPCs had some juicy drama of their own.
What I want now are their heads. Kill them for me.
I obviously was down to help a homegirl out with a small murder task, and when a thrall dick on his breath brethren was in the area, we grouped up for the hits. Afterwards I asked if he was rocking a rested XP guide as well, because then we could just keep quietly questing together, you know, menstrual cycles fully synced up, 2 boys open world questing the way it should be, but he wasn't. Don't worry, I'm out here doing God's work, but with 2 levels to go I was struggling to find any quests that were uncontested.
Some good plugs.
I originally tried phasing, but these darnassus douchebags had more layers covered than an Italian buttercream, so I chose to fight for my territory instead, even if it meant getting in a slap battle with a level 40 who learned a tough lesson that day. Not to mess with Rav the fucking avatar.
Your Rav's dead, isn't he? Oh, disperse. Okay, nice. Send out a fear here. Oh. Okay, let's go. Is this a 1v2? Mind Spike looks wild. Oh, hell yeah, Rav! Yeah, that pushback's gonna suck. Oh, nice.
And you may think I'm heartless, but I did have my moments. At one point I saw an underleveled hunter trying a quest that he would never be on at that level if he used a proper guide, and I remembered back to my own hunter days, so I decided to log a day of work at the Make-A-Wish Foundation and save him.
Nice.
We shared an unspoken bond, bowing at each other, saluting with respect, and a friendship among enemies was about to be born.
I knew it.
Psych bitches, I killed him, dinged level 40 and unlocked the full potential of the...
How the hell is Rav level 40? Wait, Rav not only is level 40, but then took the time to edit this entire video, which means Rav hit 40 yesterday, like 3 days ago, probably? 2 or 3 days ago? Bro, how is this possible? He's using rested XP? Oh, true. Maybe I need to get RXP.
The dark side I chose. But of all the ruthless killing, some of my biggest problems were with my own ranks, contesting quests, failing to help, and the power of darkness had me craving their blood as well. I just needed to find a way.
This is your emergency broadcast system announcing the commencement of the annual purge. Commencing at the siren, any and all crime, including murder, will be legal for 12 continuous hours. May God be with you all.
Yeah. The PvP, dude, I love this. I love this event. Subscribe for more. It's over? Oh no. All right, that was pretty damn good, Rav. I'm kind of pissed you beat me to level 40. Like, bro, I've been leveling really hard. I'm level 34. I've been going hard in the paint, man. Everybody should get rested XP if you don't want to level as slow as I do. All right, let's look at my recommended. So we have Peo, we have Asmongold, we have Renaissance Periodization, we have Josh Strife says Mr. Beast, Guzu. Don't know who. Chris Williamson, Zaryu. Yep, Hydra. Yep, sounds about right. Perfect. All right. Okay, there's this. How do I get this out of here, man? Okay. Star Surge nerfed even more. Okay, I think we got all that. I'm 36 and I missed the first 3 days. Yeah, dude, I'm having fun. Okay, fun.
I remember the first time I saw the man, the thing with a face like melting wax. I knew he had many masks and many names. He had followed our family for years, and from father to son, mother to daughter, the fear and terror of the faceless man got passed down. Every time he came, he would have a different face. The first time I saw him, he looked like a withered old Asian man, leaning heavily on a wooden cane with a silver top. Our front door stood wide open, and I saw my mother and father standing there, their faces as pale as ghosts, as they looked down upon the stranger. I couldn't have been older than 11 years old, but the memory is still as sharp as a butcher's knife stuck in my brain. I walked forwards from the living room, the cartoon noises still blaring loudly in the background. The man looked past them and straight at me. He squinted his eyes and grinned. "Another lamb, so pretty and young," he mused. "Isn't it a shame when a child is taken so early in life, and yet God kills children every day? I heard last month a hurricane blew an entire school down and killed 100 of the little buggers in one swift go. So perhaps God will forgive me for my small sins, my taking of a few here and there to keep my appetite satiated." "Get out of here," my father snarled through gritted teeth. He clenched his fists until the knuckles turned white, looking as if he would strike out at any moment. "Do you know who I am?" the faceless man asked in a whispery voice. Then he began chuckling. It sounded like someone trying to laugh with a slit throat, a harsh, gurgling sound that raised goosebumps all up and down my body. My father slammed the door shut quickly, locking the deadbolts. I fingered the silver cross my mother had given me nervously. I always did when I was anxious. Feeling it laying there against my cold skin helped bring me back to the moment. My father turned to look at us with panic-stricken eyes. I heard light knocking on the door behind him as the demonic laughter continued to grow, until it became all I could hear. Then, without warning, it cut off. When I looked out the peephole on the front door, I saw the front stoop stood empty. "Get my gun," my father said to my mother. She left the room, quietly sobbing as she went. Sunlight from the warm summer sky continued to stream in through the windows. What a beautiful day, I thought to myself. Such a beautiful day. and maybe my last. Then I saw a shadow cross in front of the living room window. I saw someone peeking in with wide, excited eyes, a grin like a skull spread across his leathered old face. As I watched, the face began to drip and contort as it continued to smile. It started slowly around the lips and eyes, and then it began speeding up. Within seconds, I saw the flesh running down his cheeks and chin in rivulets, dripping like flesh-coloured wax. Behind the mask he wore, I caught a glimpse of something horrible before new streams of flesh rolled over it from his scalp and forehead. Then the last of the human skin dripped off, and I found myself staring into the face of hell. I could never explain the true horror of the thing lurking behind its costume of human skin. It felt like staring into a pus-filled wound with maggots writhing around the edges, or maybe like falling into a mass grave. Some of his body seemed flipped inside out, with the glistening muscles on the outside, but the bloody, demonic face was far more disturbing. It had eyes like two smouldering cigarette burns. Its mouth was a slashed, disgusting thing. The lips looked eaten away, with ragged patches of flesh surrounding them that seemed to make the smile seem much larger, reminding me of how a clown would do his makeup. I saw that grinning mouth filled with countless needle-sharp teeth above black, sore-ridden gums that writhed and shivered in its lipless mouth. Even through the window, a smell like sulphur and reeking, spoiled meat filtered into the house, seemed to fill the air like a physical presence. Its body looked flipped inside out. I could see the quivering muscles on the skinless figure. It looked deathly thin, and veins ran along the outside of its face and body like thick, dark worms, pulsating with each beat of the satanic heart that lay inside that thing's chest, emanating sickness and evil through every pore of its gleaming body. As it stared into my soul with its black, lidless eyes, I saw in that face all the worst nightmares of the universe. I saw mountains of corpses festering under a hot sun, black holes eating worlds as masses screamed. I saw mothers drowning their children in bathtubs and animals eating each other alive. I saw into eternity, and it looked so dark and empty that I fell to my knees, pleading. "Make it stop, make it stop," I cried, tears streaming down my face. My father ran in with his shotgun raised, but when I looked back up, the window was empty. Yet the visions continued to run through my mind like a movie, atrocity after atrocity, and somehow it all connected back to the faceless man. After a few seconds of utter silence, that deep, gurgling voice rang out, making us all jump. It seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once, reverberating throughout the room. It said something that made my father waver on his feet. A strange verse, but one I remember by heart to this day. "Here is Belladonna, the lady of the rocks, the lady of situations. Here is the man with 3 staves, and here is the one-eyed merchant, and this card, which is blank, is something he carries on his back, which I am forbidden to see. I do not find the hanged man." After that, we barricaded the doors and locked all the windows. I knew it wouldn't keep the faceless man out. He could easily just smash through a window, and perhaps he wouldn't even need to do that. Maybe he could pass inside the house any time he wanted. And yet, if so, why hadn't he? So, it started again, my mother said, looking at my father with a powerful intensity in her eyes. He has come back again for a sacrifice. My father nodded slowly. What do you mean, a sacrifice? I asked, my child's mind not comprehending the magnitude of the situation yet. My father hesitated. He eats the souls of people, my father said. He and my great-grandfather drew up a contract a long, long time ago. And ever since, our family has had great wealth. You're young, so you don't really understand fully yet. But not everyone lives in mansions like us. Not everyone vacations in Paris and Buenos Aires during the summer vacation. Not everyone has a garage full of Porsches and Mercedes. So, why don't you just tell him no? I asked in my childish way. We don't need all this money. The left side of my father's face began to twitch. He stomped towards me, shouting as tears ran down his face. I don't give a damn about the money, he cried. The deal was drawn in blood and cursed from the first day. Do you think if I could get him to go away by giving him everything I own, I wouldn't? I would do it in a heartbeat. I would live in a goddamn trailer and eat instant noodles if I had to. But there's no escape. He looked around, as if expecting to see the faceless man standing right behind him. He began looking out the windows, seeing nothing but a bright summer's day. We need to go, my mother whispered. Now, let's take Susan and go. He won't find us if we keep moving. He'll find us, my father said, looking defeated. Tears continued to stream down his face. He looked like a defeated man. He always does, but screw it, let's go. We'll take this asshole on and run around the world. We took off from the property, and my father told me more about the deal as we flew out of town in an expensive Mercedes, redlining the accelerator. I thought more than once he would crash and kill us all in his frenzy to put distance between us and the faceless man. Once every 50 years, my father said, he comes. He has his pick of the litter, as he calls it. He takes one child from our family, and in exchange, our wealth is guaranteed for the next 50 years. Even during the Great Depression, our family didn't suffer. Except, of course, the periodic abductions of children. He makes the parents watch as he takes the soul of the child into himself. I don't know what kind of foul magic it involves, but from what I've read in the diaries of my grandfather, it's a very painful ritual that involves skinning the child alive and rubbing their body with special herbs. Then, he makes them walk, totally skinned and bleeding to death until they collapse, and that's when he takes the soul. He sucks it out of their eyes. It looks like thin wisps of light when it finally goes. I shook inwardly in horror. No one would ever allow that to happen to their kid, I said confidently. My father shook his head. You act as if we have a choice, he said. The first time, he comes politely, knocks on the door, and tells the parents it's time to fulfill the contract. If they say no, then he leaves. But he always comes back. And the next time, he won't be polite, and he won't leave. He'll come into the house when we're sleeping, torture me and your mother to death, slit our throats, and then take you away. He's tireless. He doesn't age. He doesn't sleep. And, as far as I know, he can't die. How can we fight against such an evil? By going to the moon? But why would Great-Grandpa make a deal like that anyway? I asked. Because, at the time, he had 10 children, and all of them were starving. A few had dysentery, and he didn't have a penny to his name at the time. He chose to sacrifice one and give it to the faceless man to save the other 9. My father shrugged. I don't know if we can understand it. I certainly don't agree with it. I'm not sure he realized at the time that our family would suffer eternally afterwards, and that the contract could not be voided except through death.
Just stop having children.
He laughed bitterly.
Forehead.
We should have just let our family line die out, maybe. That would have solved the problem. What about those words at the end, Daddy? I asked. What did those mean? Oh, that's just a famous old poem. My grandfather used to recite it to me before he shot himself. He loved T.S. Eliot, and he thought the poem had some relevance to our problems for some reason. He never got over the loss of his son to the Faceless Man, you see. Never. He used to wake up screaming at night. He tried to drink his memories away. But in the end... My father braked suddenly, bringing the car to a full stop. I looked up, seeing forests on both sides of us. We hadn't travelled long. A hitchhiker stood at the edge of the road in grimy blue jeans and a bright tie-dye shirt. His long hair rippled around him as he stood with his thumb out. But his face had started to drip and melt. We all saw it and froze. My father reached down below his seat and pulled out the black shotgun. He ran out of the car like a madman, his eyes blazing with anger and terror. "Get out of here," he cried, as if to a rabid animal, then raised the gun and fired. The Faceless Man's tie-dye shirt burst into shreds as buckshot tore into it. The Faceless Man smiled, raised his hand to us in a wave, and disappeared. The clothes fell limply to the grass below, now totally empty. My father shook his head grimly and turned around to come back to the car. A dark shape zoomed out of the forest, holding a sharp knife. Before my father could turn, he raised it to his throat and pulled. My mother screamed, getting out of the car to go help my father. But he was dead. Even as a child, I knew it. I could see the knife had practically severed his head from his body, except for the spine and a thin bit of flesh on the back. Blood poured out, flooding down his chest as he stood there for a moment, uncomprehending. Then he began to fall forwards, and his head snapped back, revealing the gore, muscle and ligaments beneath. I watched as my mother ran to his side, panic-stricken. The Faceless Man looked on with glee, laughing and shrieking. His black eyes blazed with an inner light as he looked towards me and grinned, showing the 100 needle-sharp teeth behind that supertuating sore of a mouth. My mother looked up at him, trying to grab the gun from my father's stiff hands, but the Faceless Man didn't flinch. He ran forwards, his sleek, bloody body as fast as a greyhound's. He opened his mouth wide and bit at my mother's face. I saw the teeth bite into her skin, and he began to shake his head like a dog, ripping and shredding. Her face became a mask of gore, and I screamed in the car, nearly throwing up. But something inside told me I needed to move. I wasn't a stupid kid after all. I was going to die here next to some woods in the middle of nowhere. I ran out of the back seat and jumped into the driver's seat. I'd never driven a car, but it was, after all, an automatic. It didn't take much intelligence to put it in drive and hit the gas pedal. Of course, I didn't really know how to drive, and I nearly hit a tree. I skidded, turning the wheel, and with 2 bumps, I accidentally ran over my mother and father. The Faceless Man shrieked with laughter as I drove off down the road, crying and screaming in the car. I abandoned it a few hours later in the city. My father had brought a massive envelope of cash with him in the center console, and I counted it with awe. It was hundreds of thousands of dollars. I went on the run soon after, moving across the country and living on the money I found. It was 4 years later when I went to a carnival bored and decided to have my future read. I hadn't seen the faceless man in years, and I figured I'd lost him. If only that were true. The old woman pulled out a tarot deck and began flipping them over one by one. "Ah," she said in a voice that seemed to deepen. "I see. Here is the man with 3 staves, and here is the wheel, and here is the one-eyed merchant." I screamed, backing up quickly as the flesh began to drip from her face. "And this card, which is blank, is something he carries on his back, which I'm forbidden to see." The last of the skin dripped off. The grinning thing beneath rose from the chair, its sleek, bloody body and black holes of eyes regarding me with glee. "Ah, yes, I am forbidden to see, but I've seen it. And look what it's done to me, Susan. Look what it's done. Your mother and father rot in a shallow grave somewhere, picked clean by animals. And now it's just you and me, Susan. And we're alone. The card is blank, but it doesn't have to be. Come and see what it holds." He rose into the air, his bloody, skeletal feet dangling above the ground. "Come and see." I pulled the pistol I always carried out of its holster and began firing point blank into the demonic face and black heart of that thing. People began to scream all around me at the carnival. I turned to run out of the tent, but a cold hand gripped my shoulder. "Leaving so soon?" The soft voice whispered in my ear, laughing with a sound a drowning man might make. "Ah, but we haven't finished, Susan. Worthy is the lamb, worthy is the..." Suddenly, the hand touched the silver cross my mother had given me as a small child, and it flinched away. I felt the grip loosen, and I ran without looking back. People had taken cover all over the carnival. Many had started to leave, and I saw agitated police and security trying to find out where the gunshots had come from. I immediately mixed into a large crowd and made my way towards the exit. But I constantly looked back, expecting to see a man with a melting face. Perhaps he would act like a police officer and pretend to arrest me before bringing me to some dark forest and starting the skinning process. I keep running now, but I always look over my shoulder, because the faceless man doesn't age, and he doesn't sleep, and he never, ever stops looking. For my 31st birthday, my friends got me a heritage DNA test. One of those where you send a sample and get an approximate percentage of what makes up your background. I don't think there was anything in particular that made them gift it to me though. I think they ordered one for themselves and got a 2-for-1 kind of deal. Still, I figured it'd be fun to check out. My biological grandpa died when my dad was very young, and my grandmother remarried long before I was born. So, I was never told a lot about that side of the family. I'd always been a bit of a sickly kid, so I've been wary about looking too closely at my family and health history. But I figured this couldn't hurt. So, I filled out the form, provided this sample, and sent it on its way. Then, I just sort of forgot about it. When I finally got the results, it came with a few surprising revelations. While the majority of my heritage was entirely predictable, there was an 11% splash of something called Northern Scandinavian Blue Hill Tribe. I asked my parents about it. While my mother had no idea what the Blue Hill Tribe was, she was pretty sure it wasn't from her side of the family. My dad was equally confused. Sure, he didn't know much about his biological father, but he knew for a fact that the man was from Oklahoma. His mom, on the other hand, was Minnesotan. Dad got curious and ordered his own test within the hour. As I ended the call and boxed the packaging up, something fell out. A sturdy envelope of thin navy blue cardboard and sealed with a sunflower emblem. It had a mild chemical smell to it, like a sweet ammonia. At first, I thought it was going to be some kind of special offer, much like what got me that test in the first place. But after turning it over, I could see it was addressed directly to me in handwritten cursive. It read, "Congratulations on your recent result. As part of our effort to explore the diverse world of unified heritage, and in cooperation with our various multinational partners, we would like to extend an invitation to descendants of Northern Scandinavian Blue Hill Tribe for an eventful day of education, connectivity, and celebration. Please consider this invitation and review the enclosed details at personal link using your login credentials. We hope to see you there." I didn't know exactly what to make of it, but I decided to check it out. And holy hell, it reeked of scam. Here's what it offered. A fully paid 3-day stay at a hotel in Manchester, New Hampshire. Free entry to the company-sponsored Heritage Celebration event, alongside other members of both the Blue Hill Tribe, but also other unique and diverse backgrounds. There were several groups listed, mostly hailing from the Scandis, the Carpathians, and the Ural Mountains. I would have to pay for the trip to get there though, and they were clear about food, drink, and room service not being included. But all in all, it sounded too good to be true. After several hours of trying to find my way through the customer service websites, I finally got a hold of an actual service rep over the phone. At first, they seemed to have no idea what I was talking about, but when I referenced the personal case number at the bottom of the envelope, they referred me to a special events manager. This manager, in turn, confirmed everything. I know, they laughed. I know how it sounds, but this is actually a sort of golden ticket thing. It's a biennial event and part of a charity effort, so there's a tax incentive for us as well. If you can make it, I'd recommend checking it out. They got some event photos on our website for reference." I did as she suggested, and I gotta say, I was convinced. I accepted. My flight arrived on the morning of the first event day, about 3 hours ahead of opening. I had an uneventful early check-in, spotting the locked doors through the lobby. There were a few posters marking the Heritage Celebration event, and there were already a couple of people roaming the halls outside. But I decided to catch my breath a bit before the doors opened. I got to my room and clocked out for a couple of hours. I double-checked the event schedule on my phone, making mental notes of the various talks, guided tours, luncheons, dinners, and get-togethers. It was a full 2-day event. I was surprised at just how much there was to do, considering the event was intended for no more than a couple hundred people at most. Still, I couldn't complain. But just as I drifted off for a nap, I got a notification on my phone. A text from my dad. Apparently, he'd recently gotten his results back. Strangely enough, he didn't have any percentage of the Northern Scandinavian Blue Hill tribe in his genetic makeup. Maybe my mom wasn't as southern as she thought. Once the doors opened, there were about 100 people walking about. Some looked like average Joe nobodies. Others were clearly some kind of corporate representative. I could tell at least 6 different accents just by walking around, and a couple of foreign languages. There were a few booths to check out, mostly advertising various new services and products by the company behind the DNA test, but also one that was just information about various forgotten or unusual tribes. Going through the pamphlets, I couldn't find one about the Blue Hill tribe, so I decided to ask the service rep behind the counter. "Blue Hill?" he said, raising an eyebrow. "I'm not sure I..." Another rep whispered something in his ear, and he nodded. "Right," he corrected. "We don't have any reading material on that subject, but, I think there's an info session. Should be part of the Tribes of the North meetup." I double-checked the schedule again, and made my way to a couple of events. The Tribes of the North meetup was an after-dinner event, part of the late-night off-hours socializing thing they tried to get going. I spent the afternoon listening in on various other topics, trying to pass the time. There was a speaker on the topic of nomadic North American tribes, as well as a workshop about forgotten languages. It was all interesting in its own way, but I found myself drifting away just after lunchtime. I had to take a rest around 3 p.m. because of an upset stomach, a relic from my sickly past. Later, I took a walk around town and had a decent meal at a local restaurant before I headed back to the hotel. I was a few minutes late to the meetup. There were about 24 people there in total. We didn't really have any common features. We had different skin, hair, eyes, and we were all from different parts of the US. A couple of them were Canadian, and there was this one guy from the Philippines. It was pretty clear who the event organizer was though. A chipper young woman in a black pantsuit with a company logo pin and a digital clipboard. She went around the room confirming that everyone was a member of the Blue Hill. I overheard an older woman mentioning she was categorized as over 30%, while a young man mentioned he only had 5%. The young woman cleared her throat and excused herself, calmly demanding the attention of the room. "Thank you all so much for coming," she smiled. "I'm sure you have 100 questions, and we thought this might be a good time to get to know one another a little better. Please, follow me." We were led through a corridor to a smaller, open room, a sort of meeting space in the back. They turned down the lights a bit and set out a couple of platters of cheeses, crackers, and some alcohol-free sparkling wine. There were a couple of people there already. I was about to spark up a conversation with a 50-year-old man who looked as confused as me when the chipper young woman took hold of the room again. She directed our attention to a man that I can't for the life of me remember the name of. Weston or Wesley, I think. He, in turn, welcomed us and encouraged us to indulge in the various snacks scattered throughout the room. Then he introduced us to the topic of the evening, the Blue Hill tribe. "If there is one thing I'm certain of," he started, "is that every single person in this room has had a serious medical condition at some point in their life, something unusual. Does anyone mind sharing an example?" I didn't speak up about the severe ulcers I had as a kid and the partial transplant I had to get, but there were others who openly shared various issues: heart valve issues, cornea transplants, nerve damage. Everyone seemed to have something. The man just nodded, as if expecting this. "This is sadly a common attribute of people with lineage dating back to the Blue Hill tribes. So let's take a closer look at the history and customs of these unique people. And while we do, please feel free to mark yourself in the attendance sheet. He continued to speak of a group of people native to the northern Scandinavian mountain ranges. There were dates, locations, an approximate number of tribal members, and a few other sparse details. I marked the form while I waited, realizing pretty early on that what he was saying was suspiciously generic. He spoke of leather and bone craftsmanship and a belief in mountain spirits, but there were no details, no references, no pictures, drawings, or artifacts. I noticed a lot of people around the room paying close attention and not really thinking too much about what they were filling out on the attendance sheet. But I took a closer look. Our names were already on the sheet, so we were only supposed to make a check mark. However, there were also percentages printed on the side, corresponding to the percentage of heritage we had in common with this tribe. I recognized my 11% and the 30% of the old woman. There was also a series of other numbers that I didn't immediately recognize. When I thought no one was looking, I snapped a picture of it just in case. After a 15-minute lecture on the history of the Blue Hill tribe, I came to the realization that I hadn't actually learned anything. The locations and dates were so generic that there was no way to fact check it, and there were no details as to the various customs and crafts. Looking around the room, I noticed the chipper young woman was off in the corner, whispering to someone on a Bluetooth headset, her eyes scanning the crowd with a serious demeanor. There was a man in a suit by the doorway, taking pictures with his phone, and a hotel functionary offering refreshments being turned away. This was clearly a private matter, and of great interest to the company for some reason. I snapped to attention as the room applauded. The lecture came to an end, and we were given some time to mingle, but not without another reminder to make a mark at the attendance sheet. I chatted a bit with a few people, but it all felt a bit forced. Just a few words here and there. I got the impression that none of us had very much in common. No one seemed to have any idea where that part of their heritage actually came from. There was this one guy who had studied his genealogy extensively, who insisted that it was strictly impossible for him to even be partly Scandinavian. "I've mapped out every family member for 6 generations, he scoffed. "There's no way." As more and more people filtered out into the night, I decided to lag a bit to see what was being said behind closed doors. I wasn't sneaking around on all fours like a spy, just lingered a little too long on the other side of the bathroom door or stopping conveniently to check my email near a hushed discussion. I picked up a few bits and pieces, discussions about our percentages, for example. There was also talk about a second event the following night and how it wasn't officially on the schedule. They referred to it as a sort of closing ceremony. There was also a short talk about inviting a few of us to a private meeting. I heard 2 people squabbling a bit about the details, and I didn't catch much of it, but I clearly heard a sentence as they finished. "Just get the ripe ones," one of them snarled. "None of that 3% trash." I didn't like that, not one bit. Returning to my room, I decided to pack up my things. I had a bad feeling about whatever they were up to, and I couldn't help but to imagine that they had something planned. Maybe it was all a scam, after all, or something worse. Either way, I wasn't eager to find out. I couldn't find a reasonably priced flight back home until early morning. It was almost 12 hours away, but I figured I could pull an all-nighter and get out as soon as the sun rose. I could wait a few hours at the airport if need be. With my bags packed and ready, I settled in for a long night. It was somewhere around 2 a.m. when I found myself staring at late night TV and scrolling on my phone. As a salesman prattled on in the background, a stray thought hit me. I decided to take another look at the attendance sheet photo. There was a set of numbers by each person that didn't make immediate sense to me. I brought out a pen and paper and started breaking them down. First in sets of 2s, then individually, then sets of 3, trying to find some pattern or idea. It took me a little longer than I cared to admit to recognize something. The last 4 numbers correlated to one pattern: floor and room number. That left 4 other numbers, which, when broken down into pairs of 2, correlated to a month and a day. The date itself didn't make much sense though. For me, it was a few days after I'd sent in my first sample. Then it hit me. It was probably the day they received the sample. Taking a closer look at the percentages, I could see that everyone with a 9% heritage or lower was situated on lower floors, while those with 10% and higher all seemed to have the higher floors. Maybe there was a sort of unspoken threshold happening at 10% and up. Could that be what they referred to when they said to get the ripe ones? As I scrolled through various images from previously hosted charity events, I got a notification. My phone warned me that my camera app had unexpectedly closed. Strange, seeing how it wasn't open to begin with. A bad feeling settled in my stomach. I was on the hotel Wi-Fi. Could they be monitoring our activities? I considered the option that I was just being tired and paranoid. That might very well be the case. But on the other hand, I'd heard what I'd heard. It was stressing me out, further upsetting my already sensitive stomach. I could feel a tinge of pain and decided to go get some ice. Might sound like a stupid home remedy thing, but sucking on an ice cube has always helped me calm down. I followed the corridor, got myself some ice in a bucket, and returned to my room. As I was about to round the corner, I recognized a familiar sound. My hotel room door being closed and locked from the outside. Peeking around the corner, I noticed 2 people dressed in black disappearing down the hall, mumbling quietly to one another. Returning to my room, I couldn't help but to second guess myself. Had the bathroom door always been open? Was the same channel on the TV playing? Had someone moved my bags? It was hard to tell. That's how I spent the night. Wondering. My heart sometimes skipped a beat as I thought I noticed something new. But ultimately, I couldn't find anything immediately threatening. I pulled out my phone battery just in case and kept it in my other pocket. No one would be tracking me anytime soon. I messed with my bed to make it look like I'd slept in it, even though I spent most of my time in the bathroom, ready to lock the door and call the police. I nodded off a few times, but eventually the sun broke the horizon, a few rays of sunshine slipping in through the frosted bathroom window. I got my bags and left. One nervous elevator ride later, I slapped down the hotel key on the reception and headed for the exit without elaborating. I accidentally made eye contact with the hotel security guard by the exit, who gave me a curious side-eye. "Sir?" he asked. I stopped briefly and excused myself. He held up a hand. "Sir, may I speak to you?" he repeated. "I have an appointment," I smiled. "Sorry." "It won't take long," he smiled. "Right this way." Looking at the silver-colored revolving door that could get me out of there, I considered my options. I could make a break for it, or I could just see what this was all about. I decided to just talk to the man, banking hard on it not being anything serious. In hindsight, I should have gone for the door. I was taken to a small room right next to the reception. There, he asked to see my phone. I showed him, although the battery was still out. My supervisor has a couple of questions, he said. She's just outside. Won't be a minute. I'm sorry, but I got it. He pocketed my phone, smiled, and stepped out of the room. But it wasn't an ordinary service personnel kind of smile. It was almost apologetic, like he knew he'd landed me in some kind of trouble. And through the door came the chipper young woman from the previous night. She wasn't as chipper this time. She didn't sit down, instead opting to stand on the opposite side of the room with her arms crossed. For a solid minute, she just stood there, considering what to say. Finally, she let out a sigh and took a step forward. I felt like a scorned schoolboy being dragged into the principal's office. Are you leaving early? She asked. Would be a shame to miss the get-together tonight. I'm thankful to have been part of this, I said, but I really ought to get going. Oh? She feigned surprise. Family emergency? That's private, I said. I could still hear the hotel personnel outside and figured she didn't want to make a scene. I leaned back in my chair, confident and quiet. She didn't take that too well. I think it'd be best for you if you stayed a little longer, she continued. I don't think I will. I don't think there's much to debate. I'm sorry, but you have no... She slammed a fist on the table and stared me down, unblinking and furious. There was a slight tremble in her movement. There was no way those outside didn't hear us, and yet no one moved a muscle. Perhaps she was in more control than I'd anticipated. I think you're going to stick around for a while, she snarled, or we're going to have a problem. You won't have a problem with me. No, I said, shaking my head. I don't... Then you're going to shut the hell up and play along. I was dumbstruck. There was no ambiguity here. She was outright threatening me. I could barely understand why. Maybe she'd seen something on my phone while I was connected to the hotel Wi-Fi, or maybe they noticed me spying. Perhaps they saw me pondering the attendance sheet. I don't know. Either way, they weren't taking any chances. I didn't see that hotel security guard again. Instead, they put me in a room with a very quiet man in a suit. He didn't answer any questions. He wasn't much for small talk. All he did was stand outside the room, checking in on me as soon as I made a noise. I spent all day in that room. This small 10x14 room with little more than a couch, a coffee table, and the most generic-looking hotel painting I'd ever seen. Still, as calming as that room was, I was freaking the hell out. But there was nothing for me to do at that point. No harebrained schemes could make me magically phase through the wall. I was stuck there, and I sure as hell wouldn't fight that guy. Didn't take a detective to spot. He was armed. The stress made my stomach act up. I was allowed to use the bathroom, but they kept the stall door open. Then it was straight back to the room. I tried frantically to come up with some kind of plan, or figuring out some specific turn of the corridor where he wouldn't have a clear shot. But it was useless. There were long, wide open spaces and no harsh corners. But that was my mindset. I was still under the impression that there was something I could do. But in reality, I couldn't. Once that started to dawn on me, I realized how screwed I was. It was the emotional equivalent of sinking into a deep black ocean. It was late afternoon when the door opened. Having spent most of the day napping on the couch and anxiously wandering back and forth, I got on my feet like a soldier. One of the guards coaxed me outside. I could tell something was up. People were rushing past us, speaking into their earpieces. We moved in the opposite direction, but I caught a glimpse of a well-dressed group of people used as human shields for someone very important. I was quickly ushered along. I was taken through the hotel kitchen. They'd cleared out the staff. They took me to what looked like an abandoned old walk-in freezer. I was pushed inside and the door was closed. I don't know how those walk-in freezers are supposed to work, but this one locked from the outside. There were no lights and I could barely make out what was happening through the little windows. I didn't have to wait for long. Just minutes after I could hear other people entering the room, some curious, some angry, some crying. One by one, the guests from the previous night were ushered into the freezer, even the old woman.
Alright, we've got someone.
Not all the
we've
guests.
Got a Gnomer
Only those
that I'm invited
ripe
to,
enough.
or rostered up,
There were 9 of us in total. Some were mildly
8
annoyed,
PM
others were
EST
confused.
for me, so in 4
Finally,
hours,
they dropped a
we'll be
guy
in
who had been
Gnomer,
beaten
so I got
straight
time to,
onto
like,
the floor.
Get some runes here.
He was clearly not okay,
Right
trying
now we're
his best
doing
to breathe through his
the...
mouth.
Shut up.
That set most of us
Shut
off.
up.
Some banged on the door, others screamed at the top of their lungs. No one had a
God damn
phone
it.
or a weapon. The panic rose and it spread like wildfire. Soon, I was right there with them, screaming for someone to let us out.
Pause. Alright. So yeah, we're working on Maelstrom weapon right now. It's why I've been like killing elementals and like Desolus, Dustwallow Marsh, and now I just got to get the Earth Elementals for here in Badlands. Then there's a couple more things I have to do or something like that. We'll see.
I screamed, my voice hoarse, but no one came. We must have been in there for at least 40 to 45 minutes. Our protests died, and in the following silence, we heard someone enter the room. A single set of footsteps. They approached, and we all quieted down. I could see the vague outline of a man outside, but our breaths had fogged up the windows and the door. He had a black suit with a blue tie. He stood there with his hands in his pockets, watching us. I backed away from the door. The others did the same. No matter how bad the freezer was, there was something telling me that this guy was somehow worse. He was too calm, like this was all normal. He'd done it before. As the door opened, we all scrambled to get back. He stepped into the entrance, obscured by the bad lighting, but for all I could see, he was a man, a little shorter than me, a bit round around the stomach, bald, maybe glasses. There was something reflecting off his face, and yet there was something about him that screamed danger. The man who'd been beaten was ready to roll the dice. He took off running, trying to push past and get out. There was a kitchen exit not too far away, so if he could just make it past this guy, then maybe he'd be in the clear. But no, he didn't get that far. The strange man didn't tackle him, or attack, or scream. In fact, he didn't seem to react at all. But the runner, well, he stopped a few steps short of leaving the freezer. He clutched his throat, gasping for air. The man spoke in a raspy, matter-of-factly voice, as if counting the inventory on the supermarket shelf. Male, 38 years old, 6-year spread reaching a total of 18%, implant through esophagus surgery. And then there was this ungodly noise. The runner collapsed to his knees. He was trying to scream, but all that came out was a sort of guttural wheeze. It escaped him in waves, involuntarily, until we could see something poking out of his mouth, like the silhouette of a wet branch being pulled out. Finally, there was a snap as it fully dislodged and the freezer began to reek of blood. He stopped moving. The panic consumed us. I may read calm here in the aftermath, but in that moment, I was an animal. I was scratching on the damn walls, trying to get back. I didn't care if I was pushing people into the floor or stepping on someone's head. I was desperate. The strange man spoke again, but this time, his raspy voice seemed better, improved. Female, 29 years old, 4-year spread reaching a total of 14%, implant through spinal surgery. One by one, he counted us off. Male, female, 4 years, 5 years, 9, 8. Percentages going up and down. Lung cancer, cornea transplant, dialysis, screams and blood. One by one being pulled out of the crowd, and then pulled apart. I'll never forget the sounds. Small bones sound like carrots when they snap. Bigger ones, it differs. The dripping noise as human spillage mixed on the floor. Drops of blood really do sound heavier than water. And with every victim, I could see something shift in our captor, straightening back, deeper breaths, like he was absorbing it all into himself, taking something back, harvesting. The 6th person on the chopping block was me. He read it all out loud. Male, he began, 31 years old, 24-year spread, reaching a total of 11%, implant through ulcer treatment. My stomach rumbled, moved, twitched, as if coming alive. It wanted to escape me, to break free. It strained against me. I collapsed to the floor, my hands slipping on the blood, seeping into my skin, itching under my fingernails. Then, I felt something move in my pocket. I almost dropped it. I still had my phone battery. I took it out and held it up to my mouth. I could bite down on it, drenching myself in acid, or God knows what. My stomach ceased moving, if only for a short reprieve. I looked up at my captor. See this? I said. It'll screw us both up, but you need it, right? You need me whole. There was no response. I could just see him tilting his head down at me. Yeah, if I destroy myself, you get nothing, right? That's it, isn't it? Huh? I placed it between my teeth, ready to bite down like a rabid dog on a juicy bone. He didn't move as I got up. We circled one another. He wasn't about to let me go. He wasn't looking at me in the eyes. He was staring intently at my stomach. He wanted to pull it out of me, to turn it into something else. Or maybe it was part of him all along, something coming home. No, he said. It ends. He reached out a hand for me, and I bit down without hesitation. To my surprise, there was just a little puff, but that was it. The battery tumbled to the floor, useless. The man instinctively recoiled, but upon seeing that there was no danger, it all came back with a vengeance. The pain was immediate and incredible. Something in me moved, and I immediately spat up a glob of stomach acid. Then, the battery exploded. It wasn't a big explosion, just a loud bang. like the starting of a pistol race. I slipped and slid my way out of the freezer and had to make a split-second decision. I could close and lock the door behind me, effectively sealing him and everyone in there, or I could leave the door open for others to escape. But it wasn't really a choice. Not really. It never is when you get pushed into something like this. I slammed that door shut and let it auto-lock without even thinking about it. Perhaps he asked the guards to clear out. I don't know. But there was no one else in that kitchen. I grabbed a knife from one of the counters, burst through the exit door, and disappeared into the night, my stomach stirring like a restless animal, but settling as I got further away. I can only regret what happened to those left behind. It still makes my spine itch. A police patrol found me wandering the streets about an hour or two later. I can't imagine it looked good. I was taking such small, shallow breaths, and I was still clutching the knife. Not to mention, I was covered in blood. They were convinced that I killed someone, but I surrendered willingly and eagerly. I tried to tell a coherent story, but they just didn't understand me. Probably didn't make much sense. A shower and a fresh set of clothes later, I explained my experience at the hotel to the best of my ability. Sadly, it didn't really do much. There were no records of the man I described ever visiting that hotel. As for the missing people, those I claimed had been murdered, they had checked out one by one at different hours of the day prior, according to the hotel records. They might be missing, but there was no indication of foul play. Yeah, I'm calling lies on that. So yeah, that was by far the worst time of my life. Looking back at it, it feels unreal, like it happened to someone else. But even now, I can still get little flashes of something that reminds me of that night, and it just pulls me right back. It never really leaves. Whoever that man was, he was important enough to get a whole company to cover for him. I'm sure not all of them knew why they were doing it, but they were complicit. I think we're looking at someone with a lot of resources and a lot of reach. I never got a name, and seeing how he seemed to change with every victim he consumed, I can't really tell what he looks like anymore, not even his age or height or weight. There are, surprisingly, some real records about a small tribe of people living from the Blue Hill in the Scandinavian mountain range. There isn't much out there about them, just a mention that they worshipped immortal mountain spirits. Others say they worship devils. It's a mixed bag. I don't know what to believe. I don't know what I saw, but I'm living with the knowledge that a part of me, something inside me, isn't my own. It moves with me, it lives with me. But at the snap of a finger from that thing, and it will rebel. It will fail me. And I'm just at, 11%? What happens when I reach 50 or 100? I decided to post this after getting a video ad that I could never have anticipated. It seems that this company is still in business, advertising their new generation of DNA tests. I'm sure some of you out there have seen it. 20 seconds, unskippable, smiling faces, distant family members being tied together by a CGI blue ribbon. I think they have some of those damn sunflowers in the background, still coloured that basic company blue. And seeing it like that, it made my stomach turn.
Alright, we're done. I don't know, people like bitched about this specific rune of like getting it and like the whole grind or whatever. Is like, come on, it took me like maybe less than 2 hours to do this whole thing. Like, well, at least this part, I think I gotta kill like rare spawn or some shit like that, or I mean an elite, something like that. I could solo it. I'd win. But I think I might want to go water shields. Yeah, water shields. Yeah, I guess power surge for like single target, and then I just go firing over for AoE for my waste rune. I think what I'm getting here is like another waste rune, but it's like the better single target, I guess. I don't know. I think maybe power surge is more for like PvP, I think. It's 5% chance to reset, like that's a 5%, I don't know. Maelstrom is like kind of guaranteed type of deal. Yeah, we're going up here. I don't know if this is like where or no, I think this guy's gonna get me to get a potion. And yeah, that's why I got the crystal vial. Then I gotta go back to 1,000 Needles. I'm gonna drink the vial and talk to the flight master. Kill the closest caster, then kill the elite water elemental. Loot the eye. Okay. So apparently it's gonna like spawn 2 things or some shit. Looking forward to it.
Hey everybody, it's me again, Jay the delivery guy. If you're not familiar with me, or maybe you forgot, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. See, I'm not your ordinary sort of delivery guy. I don't work for Uber Eats, Skip the Dishes, or DoorDash. I deliver food, beer, liquor, cigarettes, and just about anything else you can think of to the citizens of Hollow's End. Provided you can pay cash on delivery, and you're not on our list of offenders. And when I say we'll deliver anything, I mean anything. Once I delivered a muffler. Another young customer paid cash to bring their school homework to someone, probably for the purposes of cheating. And those are just the tamest examples I can think of. Don't ask about the albino crocodile. May he rest in pieces. I've been accused of being ethically dubious. Well, one kid, who probably played way too much D&D, insisted on labeling me as chaotic neutral. In short, I do my best not to break the law. Unless I'm tricked into it. And that happens semi-frequently. I try to avoid the black market, but sometimes you just can't help it. It's right there off Main Street, and it's a killer shortcut. I used to work for a real low-life scumsucker named Doc, who had a monopoly in this business, and acted like a complete Scrooge, paying a measly $2 per delivery. But now it's just me and my grandma Muriel running the show, since that one time Doc tried to kill us and we had to take the son of a bitch out for good. We're the only delivery service in town now, here in Hollow's End, and if you want to get something delivered to your door from us, you have to abide by the rules. Not trying to kill us being first on the list. Rule number 2 is just as obvious, and I've already mentioned it. You need to have cash. Don't expect to pay with debit or credit, because if you do, you're going to be disappointed. We don't even have a machine. Rule number 3 is less obvious, unless you happen to live in Hollow's End, or if you know about the horrifying shit that goes down here. No deliveries to subterraneans. If you're not familiar with those guys, you're better off. But basically they're an underground cult who worship ancient oversized millipedes. We've had run-ins with them in the past, more than once, and that's why they've been blackballed for life, despite the fact that they're phenomenal tippers. The subterraneans, not the millipedes. Apparently some horrible shit involving them happened to me once as a child, but my grandma refuses to tell me any more about it, and my memory has blocked it out entirely like a trauma my brain has buried. But I do remember when they tried to sacrifice Muriel and I in a ceremony in the forest a couple years back, after luring us out into the woods with an expensive delivery call. That wretched memory is still very clear and vivid in my mind. Which leads us to rule number 4. No deliveries to the forest after dark. That's where the subterraneans live, first of all. They have an underground compound which is labyrinthian and extends maze-like beneath the forest for miles in every direction. But it's also where the giant millipedes rise to the surface to feed. particularly after the sun goes down. So most people try to avoid the woods, especially after dark. And if you're too dumb to do that, well, we're not going to bring you any pizza. It's just that simple. The radio crackled to life and broke me from my thoughts of company rules and ritual human sacrifice. Come in, rooster. Come in. Henhouse calling rooster. Come in, rooster. Muriel insisted on coming up with new code names for us and changing the radio channel every single day like CIA spies. Don't ask me why. It's like she thought there were people out to get us or something. I don't like to get on her bad side, so I just played along. This is Rooster, Henhouse. What you got for me? I've got a back-to-back for you, Rooster. You ready? I'll give you the deets. Go ahead, Henhouse. I'm ready. First call is to 274 West Street. You got a pickup waiting for you there that you're going to deliver to 18 Elm Street. Okay, got it. What about after that? You said it's a back-to-back? There was a long pause. Oh, you're breaking up, Rooster. I'll talk to you more when you get over to 18 Elm Street. Over and out. I tried to get her to answer me again, but there was no response. This wasn't sitting well with me. Muriel could be sneaky sometimes when she wanted to get things done, especially if she knew I wasn't going to go along with her plans. This had scheme written all over it, and I had a funny feeling I wasn't going to like this delivery one bit. Regardless, it was a quiet day, and I needed the money. I put the key in the ignition and turned it forward, listening to the satisfying sound of the engine as it began to purr and cough and sputter, then settled into its steady laryngitic rhythm once again. That's a girl, I said, rubbing the dashboard. Just a little while longer, baby. We'll get through this together. One day at a time. It sputtered again, then stalled, as if to say it didn't like me touching it that way, and I apologized before getting it going again and driving off, leaving Randy's rotisserie shop behind. When I arrived at 274 West Street, I was surprised to see there were 2 foot soldiers waiting at the end of the driveway, holding up their hands to stop me. When I say foot soldiers, they were literally a foot tall and appeared to be made of plastic. They had been painstakingly hand-painted by the looks of them, and were holding very realistic-looking rifles. They reminded me of the little green toy soldiers I had played with as a child, except for their size, and the paint jobs which gave them a more realistic appearance. Halt, who goes there? The one on the right asked. Jay, the delivery guy? I answered. I was told to come here to pick up a package. Identification, sir? The one on the left asked, far down below my open window. I poked my head out to look down at him and saw he was holding his hand out, waiting for me to produce my driver's license. Sure. I pulled out my wallet and showed it to him. Can I park now? I don't get paid by the hour here, fellas. Go ahead, the one on my side said, then pulled out a tiny walkie-talkie. Sentry to home base. Gopher is on site for delivery pickup. Really? More code names? And did that little bastard just call me Gopher? I parked the car and got out, walking towards the front door of the house. Before I went up the steps, I did a quick double take at the garden gnomes, which had been arranged around the front lawn. Yep, those were definitely moving. They appeared to be working in tandem to create a new garden gnome, hacking away at a stump of wood with little knives and making a crude replica of themselves. Like a photocopy of a photocopy, it wasn't quite as nice as the original. One of them caught me looking, and I averted my gaze quickly as his bushy brow knit into a scowl. I knocked on the front door of the house, and someone came to answer it a moment later. The woman opened the screen door, smiling and holding a very large box in her hands. Oh, hello, you must be Jay, she said, readjusting the big box as if it were very heavy. I'm Blarian. Hey, nice to meet you. You got some place here. I've never seen anything like it. Oh, that looks heavy. Here, let me help you. I reached out to grab it, and she took a step back, keeping it to herself a moment longer. She bumped backwards into the wall behind her, and poked her head around the giant box to look at me. You'll have to be very careful with this, she said, raising an eyebrow. No speeding or taking corners too fast. This is an extremely fragile package. Not a problem, I said, trying to think of a way to reassure her before settling on, I delivered cake once. I made a gesture with my hands to show her how large the cake had been, and she gave me an odd look, slotting the giant box into my arms as if I had been adjusting them for that purpose. It was really awkward. But what can I say? I'm a weird dude. Okay. Can I trust you with this, Jay? It is very important that this delivery arrives at 18 Elm Street. Do not make any stops along the way. I got it. You can trust me. I'm a professional. I lumbered down the steps, trying not to trip or step on any errant garden gnomes, then tossed the large box into the back of the car. A weird noise came from inside that I couldn't identify. Backing out rapidly, I tried really hard not to run over the toy soldiers at the end of the driveway, and I'm 98% sure I was successful. I drove off towards 18 Elm Street, trying to ignore the strange noises coming from the box in the back seat. But it was more than a little difficult. It sounded like voices speaking, whispering in low tones. Of course, the second place was over on the west side of town, across the bridge, so it took me more than 15 minutes to arrive at the house. It was a single-story home with a porch out front. The pillars and railing painted a startling bright white. The siding was a soft blue color, clean and freshly painted like the porch. Before I had even gotten out of the car, a stone-faced man came out the front door. The wooden planks of the porch groaned beneath his weight, and the steps bent under his feet as he came down the stairs to greet me. The man's skin was gray, and in the light I could see he appeared to be made of rock.
Hello there, young man. You must be Jay. I'm Mr. Livingstone.
Nice to meet you, sir. I have a delivery here for you from...
Actually, I'm not sure if your dispatcher told you, but I'm actually going to ask that you take that package to a different address. You see, I'm merely a middleman in this exchange.
Oh. Well, yeah, I guess she did say it would be...
Splendid! So here, take this envelope, and once you're far away from my house, you can read the address inside, and take the package there without further delay.
He was shooing me back to my car and eyeing my back seat as if the package contained a biological weapon. Hey, ow, ow, okay, alright, I'm going. So what's in the box, anyways? You're acting like you don't want it here for another second. Should I be worried about it being in the backseat of my car?
Nonsense, it's just a big, silly box. You can go now. Thank you so much for your efforts. You'll receive a big tip when you deliver that package, I assure you.
That part sounded good, at least. But part of me was still asking, what's in the box? I started the engine and drove off, watching the man's face in the mirror as he waved at me. Even in the tiny reflection, I could see the dread in his eyes fading, and the relief as I got further away. Whatever was in that box, it wasn't good. I was more than a little worried about the safety of the person I was delivering it to. Not to mention my own. Muriel, come in, I said into the radio. Come in, Muriel. There was no response. I looked at the clock and realized it was after quitting time for her. Despite her earlier professionalism, she had no qualms about leaving me stranded on a call if it was 1 minute past the end of her shift. Great. Just great. She was probably on her way to the casino, which meant I was on my own yet again. I opened the envelope at a stop sign and looked inside, hoping there would be some money in there, as well as the location of the next stop. Of course, there was no money, just a scrap of paper with some scribbled writing on it. The address was on the far outskirts of the opposite edge of town, on the east side of Hollow's End. Perfect. In the back seat, the box shook violently suddenly, making a loud, rattling noise. Then it settled and was still again. I watched it in the rearview mirror for a few seconds, then decided it was done whatever it was doing for now. Screw it, I said, putting the car into drive. I don't get paid enough for this shit. I drove off towards the east side of Hollow's End, my eyes drifting to the rearview mirror and to the box in the back seat. I watched it out of the corner of my eye, as the sinking feeling in my stomach grew heavier and heavier. The drive to the third house was more than a little nerve-wracking. The box in the back seat kept rattling and shaking, making noise occasionally like people were speaking back and forth inside of it. Tiny, high-pitched voices speaking with authority and whispering orders. Every time I stopped at a red light or a stop sign, I would reach back there and examine the box, making sure there were no holes or tears in the cardboard. Each time I found it was intact and breathed a sigh of relief. Finally, I arrived at the house, an old 2-story home with off-white siding and black shutters. The siding had faded to a weather-beaten gray color with age, and ivy was crawling up the building on all sides, as well as a tangle of bushes that were growing far out of control out front. A rusted television antenna was jutting from the roof beside the chimney, looking ready to tip over and collapse with a strong gust of wind. The roof tiles were falling off, and the bare tar paper could be seen underneath in places. I parked in the gravel driveway and got out, taking the large box from the back seat and double-checking to make sure it was still intact. Whatever was in it, I didn't want it in my car for the drive home after my shift. That would be this dude's problem. After setting the box down on the porch, I knocked on the door. I thought about running away right then, like a kid playing ding-dong ditch, but decided that would have been unprofessional. And it was my personal business I was representing here, even if I was delivering some sort of autonomous murder device. Not to mention, a little voice in my mind spoke up. There was that big tip Mr. Livingstone mentioned. He can't give you a tip if you run away. The rusted screen door was as worn-looking and old as the rest of the house, and the wooden one behind it squeaked loudly on its hinges as a man opened it. He stayed behind the glass of the screen door and waited for me to speak before saying anything. Hello? Magnus Lahart? I have a delivery here for you. I tried not to sound nervous.
A delivery? A delivery. Oh, yes, I am expecting something. But this box is quite large for... Oh, never mind. Bring it inside, please, would you? My eyes aren't what they used to be, and I'm likely to knock over a lamp if I were to attempt it.
He swung the screen door open, and I reluctantly obliged. I really wasn't a fan of going into people's houses. When you live in Hollow's End, you learn to be cautious. But this guy seemed to be alright. Not to mention, inside was where most people kept their money.
Can I get you a cup of tea? I have the kettle on,
the man said, adjusting his glasses and pointing me towards the living room. I set the box down there with a sigh, straightening my back and stretching it afterwards. The damn box was heavy, and awkward, as if things were running around inside of it, constantly shifting it off balance. I'm okay, thanks, really.
It's no bother. I rarely get visitors. I made some cookies as well.
The smell of freshly baked cookies was in the air, and I couldn't help but want to try one. Still, part of me was saying to run, and get far away from this place, before whatever was inside that box got out. One of the flaps of cardboard at the top began to bend and twist as something tried to push its way out, straining against the packaging tape. But then it settled down again and was still. I really need to get going, I said as the man emerged from the kitchen with a tray of cookies. He handed me one, and I instantly took a bite, and stuffed 2 more in my pocket. They were soft and warm, the chocolate still melted and liquid when I bit into it.
Nonsense, you aren't going anywhere,
he said, setting the tray down on the table. With a motion of his hand, the front door swung shut, with a bang and a series of locks click into place all at once. A chain moved as if lifted by an invisible hand, and a heavy bar settled into slots on either side of the door frame to fortify it all. Tea? He asked, pouring us each a cup as if nothing had just happened. I was suddenly wishing I'd used the restroom at the rotisserie place before coming here. He slid the cup of tea over towards me, and I looked at it distrustfully.
You're gonna tell me who sent you. Oh, and I'd also like to know exactly what's inside that box. I can detect something, but I'm not entirely sure what it is for some reason. It's strange.
The delivery? You said you were expecting something. This is probably that thing you ordered. I tried, my voice sounding desperate. I don't know what's inside. I didn't look.
You're a liar. And a poor one at that. Whatever is inside that box is dangerous, and you are well aware of that. And yet you brought it here anyways. Why is that? Are you an assassin?
His eyes flashed with anger, and he picked me up by my collar, lifting me up into the air easily. I realized I had no idea what this man might be capable of, if he even was a man. This was Hollow's End, after all. He could be a sorcerer, or a wizard, or any number of magical beings. What the hell had I been thinking coming inside? "I'm not an assassin," I squeaked. "I'm just a delivery guy." He looked me in the eye for several long moments, then let me go. Still, I didn't drop for a few seconds. I realized that I was floating a few feet in the air, and almost turned my ankle when I dropped unexpectedly. "Give me the address where you picked up the package. That is all I ask. If you provide me with that information, I will let you live." I was about to give him what he wanted when I noticed the box was open, and tipped over on its side, and also empty. Oh, that's not good. He turned around when he saw the look on my face and turned a shade paler. "Impossible. I cast a ward on that box to keep it sealed." A scurrying sound could be heard from the kitchen, and I realized whatever was inside that box was now loose in the house. "Okay, we need to get the hell out of here right now," I said. "Those things are evil, I'm pretty sure." "I thought you didn't know what was inside the box." "I don't," I stammered. "But the lady I got it from, she had all these foot-tall miniatures that were alive. There were soldiers and garden gnomes, and I figured it was something like that. She said not to make any stops and acted like it was a top-secret mission or something. But then I brought it to the other place, and the guy who told me to bring it here was acting all scared like it was radioactive or some shit." I was rambling on and couldn't stop talking. But the man seemed to be quite pleased to listen. I realized that cookie was in my hand, and I'd eaten a bite of it before realizing this guy had magic powers. And then I had one more bite after that. What can I say? It was good. "What's in these cookies?" I asked suspiciously. "Oh, the usual. Flour, eggs, sugar, truth serum, chocolate chips, coconut." I spit out the bite in my mouth. "Coconut? Dude, that's disgusting." "Go on with your story, delivery boy." "Call me Jay, will ya?" "That's about it. I brought the box here, and then you locked me in, and the things got out." "Oh. So you really don't know what it is?" "No. But whatever it was, it sounded like there was more than one. It sounded like there was a whole bunch of them in there." "Damn. Alright, I guess I won't kill you then. The creatures you unwittingly brought here are likely stuffed assassins. Undersized, but still deadly commandos." I gawked at him stupidly, then picked up my cup of tea to wash down the rest of the cookie. "Don't drink that, it's poison," he said as I brought it to my lips. "Now, we'll need to figure out exactly what sort of mini-assassins we're dealing with before trying to dispatch them. Come with me." "Can I at least call for help?" I asked, pulling out my cell phone. "We can get the sheriff over here, or Deputy Randy. Which reminds me, running away is also a viable option." "We are not going to run. And we're not going to call the cops for a few oversized action figures. I'm sure I can take care of them." "All right," I agreed reluctantly, going with him down a short hallway. "But you didn't see the face of that dude who sent me here. Mr. Livingstone, he was acting like there was a bomb in that box with a very short fuse." Lahart stopped mid-stride in the hallway. "Livingstone. Of course he's involved. Come right this way." He started moving again, and quickly ushered me into a dark room with a glowing orb at its center. "I prefer not to use magic if I don't have to. These things all come with a cost, after all. But I do have one item of great magical power which I was tasked to protect many years ago. Recently I had a break-in. They were unable to get past my wards and enter this room, but I suspect they found out what was inside." He gestured to the glowing orb, which hovered just above a pedestal in the center of the room. "This is what Livingstone is after, I'll wager. He's looking to get his hands on it, even if it means killing us both. If he's planning on selling it to the highest bidder, I shudder to think what it might mean for the world. We can't let that happen." I stammered, trying to come up with a response as he picked up the glowing orb and handed it to me. "I thought you said we were going to be fine. You said you could deal with it." He raised an eyebrow to look at me. "Has anyone ever told you that you are extremely gullible?" I didn't want to admit it, but I'd heard it a few times. No. Not unless there's money involved.
Interesting. Here, take the orb and go, before those tiny assassins get here. If you return it safely to me with a rescue team at your disposal, I will give you, let's say, $500.
The option of haggling was tempting, but we were also potentially going to die if I didn't agree with him quickly. I shook his hand, glancing up at the wall and seeing a diploma from somewhere called the School of Mystical Arts. The name of the person it was given to was not Lahart, I noticed. It said Ajeti, and I got the feeling he was using an alias. And this man probably had more than one. Deal. I'll be back with help. Just try to survive until then. Those things are dangerous, whatever they are. He opened the window to let me out. I took one last glance at the bespectacled man with the ponytail and thanked him for letting me go.
Don't thank me, just run! You need to take that somewhere it'll be safe. Somewhere they won't get their hands on it. And don't tell me where, just go. And bring back help.
He shoved me out the window, and I rolled awkwardly in the grass as I landed. You know, a 10 to 15% tip is customary in addition to the set fee, I yelled, interrupted by the window slamming shut. A moment later, the screaming began, muffled by the window pane. I'm not proud of myself, but I ran. It was what he told me to do, after all. I just hoped the guy would be alright. Racing back to my car, I got in, setting the glowing orb in the passenger seat. I looked at it for a few seconds, then buckled it in with a seatbelt. It looked like a cute little egg baby, and I wondered if I should have put it in the back or in a car seat in case of an accident. But there was no time for that now, and I didn't own a car seat. I put it in reverse and began to back out of the long driveway. Taking one last glance at the house, I saw a squad of foot-tall miniature soldiers emerging from the front door in battle formation. They were carrying Lahart on their shoulders, standing him up like a trophy. He was tied to a dolly, the kind you use to move furniture or heavy boxes. There were so many of them. No wonder that damn box was so heavy. I drove as fast as I could towards downtown Hollow's End. For one of the first times in my life, I was actually going to ask the police for help. I wasn't sure what they were going to do, considering the circumstances, but I needed backup. Parking in front of the sheriff's office, I turned off the car and was about to get out. But then I realized I was being stupid. The toy soldier assassins had seen my car, which meant I needed to hide it. If they saw it out front, they would know exactly where I was. If they were anything like the little bastards in that movie Small Soldiers, they would be tactical and clever. I rewatched it recently and had forgotten how much of a horror vibe it had for a kid's movie. Anyways, now I was living it, so I had to be smart. I drove around the block and parked at the rear of a building several doors down, hoping this would throw them off my trail. I still wanted the car to be close so I could get to it if I needed it. When I went to unbuckle the glowing orb thing, I noticed something strange. It was getting more oblong and egg-like the longer I spent with it. Back at the house, it had looked almost completely spherical and round. Now it was shaped like a vertically stretched out egg. It's probably not good, I said, unbuckling it and tucking it beneath my coat. Let's get you inside. I ran around to the entrance at the front of the building and went inside the sheriff's office. Immediately, I was greeted by a friendly face. Grandma? What the hell are you doing here? I work here, Jay, she said from behind the recently constructed counter near the entrance. And watch your language. They needed a hand dealing with all the walk-in traffic. Okay, whatever. Never mind. I need your help. There are some assassins trying to kill me and... Jay, you're being extremely rude. There's someone ahead of you in line. She was right, of course. There was a man in front of me who had gills on his neck as well as webbing between his fingers and toes. His skin was scaly like a fish, and when he turned to scowl at me, I noticed his teeth were sharp and pointed. I took a step back. Sorry, please go ahead. I'll wait. As I tapped my foot impatiently, I couldn't help but notice that the glowing egg was getting more and more elongated beneath my coat. It was starting to look like I was pitching a tent with a deified armpit boner. Finally, they started wrapping things up, and I tried hard not to eavesdrop, but couldn't really help it.
Okay, so you'll need to fill out this form, as well as the H592A, in order to apply for a pond-based dwelling domicile. Bring these back to me as soon as you can, Mr. Aspinall.
Please, Bajani is fine. Can I fill these out here? It doesn't look like it will take very long.
You absolutely can. Here's a pen. Give it back when you're finished. I just ask that you go have a seat over there so I can help this gentleman who's next in line. He looks like he's in a bit of a pickle.
Of course. You've been most helpful.
The counter was finally clear, and I approached it with what I hoped was a reproachful look on my face. Really? I couldn't wait 2 minutes? I was trying to tell you there are assassins coming after me. They're trying to kill me. I need help, Grandma. I looked over her shoulder to see the deputy was sleeping one off in his own personal apartment, the town's solitary jail cell. Hey, Deputy Randy, I need some help. Wake up, man.
Good luck,
Muriel muttered as I went past her.
He's been out cold for 12 hours. He'll need at least 3 more before he can function properly. That's half the reason they hired me.
My eyes searched the bullpen desperately.
If you're looking for Sheriff Parsons, he isn't here. He went to go help some people who were being attacked in the forest.
No, I'm looking for something else. The sheriff told me to only do this in case of emergency. Finally, I found what I was looking for, sitting on the floor beside the sink. The sheriff's trusty bucket.
Oh dear. Good luck convincing him to help you after that.
20 minutes, 1 cold bucket of water, and 1 cold, hard slap to my face later, I was on the road with Randy, the sheriff's deputy. He was soaking wet and looked really pissed off. I am so sorry, I tried to say, but he cut me off. Not another fucking word. I'm only helping you because you said there's a citizen of Hollow's End who's out there in trouble. Now, as soon as we're done helping him, I'm placing you under arrest for dousing a sleeping sheriff's deputy. That's not even a real crime. And anyway, Sheriff Parsons told me to do it, in case of emergency. And you have to admit, this is technically an emergency. I'm gonna get even with you later. And don't try to sweet talk your way out of this with promises of free liquor deliveries for life. Because I'm not interested. Nobody has suggested that. But you know what? Actually, pull over. Pull over, right here. I'll get out here. Okay, fine. Free deliveries for life. That does not include tips or the price of alcohol. Jeez, between you and Swampy, I'm going to be working for free. Wise decision, knucklehead. Now drive onwards. Let's go save this besieged wizard. To be clear, I never told him the man was a wizard. We arrived at the old house to find it empty. There was no one inside or out. And of course, this made Randy suspicious and angry. Even more than he already was. I believed your ass when you told me there were tiny toy soldiers running around here trying to kill people and steal magical relics. I expected to see some Tommy Lee Jones small soldier shit happening over here. I wanted to stomp Little Green Man under my feet like they obviously should have done throughout that entire movie. And now I find out it's all a lie? For shame, Jay. For shame. Well, looks like you're going to jail after all. Turn around, place your hands behind your back. You have the right to remain stupid. If you choose to waive that right, good luck, because you can't fix dumb. That's what Mom always said anyways. Wait, I wasn't making it up. It's real, look. The cardboard box I had brought the toy soldiers in was sitting tipped over on the floor. And inside there was one broken soldier who I had apparently irreparably damaged during transport, despite my impeccable driving. It was crawling out of the box as if wounded and had a knife in its tiny hand.
Kill me,
it begged. Terrifying, Randy said, stepping on it. The plastic crunched beneath his feet, and the arms and legs went flying. So this is what you're so scared of? There were like 20 of them! And they tied up Lahart, and he said to get help and come back and protect the achy baby? I swear, I'm not making this up. Please, don't take me to jail. I tried to think of where the miniature soldiers would have taken the man, and thought of one other place where he could be. Mr. Livingstone, he's the one behind all this. I bet the soldiers took Lahart there. They probably held him at knife point and made him drive. That's why his car isn't here. And why else would he leave his door and windows wide open, especially in this town? Trust me, he's under duress, and that's where they took him. I didn't know this for sure, but was really hoping it was the case. Well, good thing I brought my gun then. Let's go, delivery boy. Lead the way. I did. Part of me wondering where else his gun would be. Maybe it was better if I didn't know. We arrived at the house on Elm and parked on the street. Immediately, I got the impression that someone was watching us. I could feel eyes on me as I got out of the car, leaving the glowing relic in the back seat. It was starting to look more and more like a staff, a double-sided lightsaber made of soft yellow light. That was when I noticed with alarm that it actually burnt a hole right through the ceiling and floor of my car, the egg growing longer until it surpassed the dimensions of the vehicle. The holes in the metal were red around the edges, fading to black as it cooled. Remind me to keep that thing away from my dick, I muttered. What's that? Nothing. Are you sure this is safe? I feel like this is really dangerous for some reason. I mean, this guy just sent little assassins to kill a guy with magic powers. What's he gonna do to us? I'm not too worried about it, Randy said, marching up the walkway towards the front door. I told you this guy's made of stone, right? I called after him, and he spun around 180 degrees and marched back towards me. Seriously, dude? You didn't think to mention that fact? I thought he did. You definitely did not. Shit. I think we're gonna need some backup. Stone people are tough bastards. What backup? I thought it was just you and Parsons on the force. We got a few auxiliary folks recently. LaDonna Spivey, Carrie Harkonnen, some other guy who calls himself Big Joe. I'm gonna call them up and see if they can make it out here to help. Keep in mind, they are technically trainees. Randy got on the phone and made a couple quick calls. While he was doing that, I looked around, trying to see if anyone had spotted our arrival. Sure enough, there was someone watching us. Get down! I yelled to the deputy, tackling him and sending him to the ground. A shot fired from the sniper on the roof, who I had seen at the last second. A tiny miniature assassin with a long-range rifle scope, mounted on a gun almost as big as he was. Judging by the size of him, you wouldn't think it would do much damage, but to my surprise, the car window behind where Randy had been standing smashed with the impact, broken glass landing all around us. What the fuck? Randy yelled, putting the cell phone away. Are those the little green army men? I nodded, grabbing his shirt and pulling him behind the car for cover. Not so harmless anymore, huh? I chided, elbowing him in the ribs. Don't you dare say I told you so. He pulled out his pistol and checked to make sure it was loaded. Satisfied, he racked the slide and got ready to fight. I hate being the responsible one. This is bullshit. I want Parsons back. Well, at least you got those reserve guys. Speaking of which, how long until they get here? Who knows? They're still in training. But at least they're armed. Lahart has to be in that house, being held prisoner. We gotta get him out of there somehow. I owe it to the guy, especially after delivering that box full of mini-assassins to his doorstep. Well, you got any ideas? Because I'm fresh out, Randy said, pulling out a flask and taking a quick swig. Seriously? How can you drink that right? I paused mid-sentence and looked at the flask. Then I snatched it out of his hand. Hey, what the hell are you... He stopped suddenly, looking around at our adversaries. Oh, let me guess. You're gonna go all Sylvester Stallone on him and rip off a strip of your shirt, stuff it into the flask, set it on fire, and throw it like a Molotov cocktail? No, I answered, taking a long swig of whiskey. I just really needed a drink. This day's been fucked right from the start. I took another long drink before he snatched it back from me. You son of a bitch, you drank half of it. You shouldn't be drinking anyways. You're an on-duty police officer. Fucking Boy Scout over here, just like Parsons. Alright, I guess we're just gonna have to wait for backup after all, Randy said as another sniper round fired and shattered another window. Now, this is really important. We might be waiting here for a minute or longer before they arrive. So, while we have some time, I need to ask you. If you were stranded on a desert island, could only bring 7 books with you, which ones would you choose? I'll go first. We stayed there for several minutes, discussing how many rations, matches, and survival kits would fit into a hollowed-out physician's reference guide, before we heard a series of gunshots. They were different from the typical ones we've been hearing for the past few minutes. The ones that have been trying to kill us. Sounds like our backup might have finally arrived, Randy said, looking around. You want to check and see if that little bastard on the roof's still trying to shoot us? Yes, I mind. That sounds like a great way to get shot. Ugh, so sensitive. Alright, I guess I'll do it myself. He began to construct a makeshift dummy from nearby materials, using his coat with the hood up and a shotgun for the body. Slowly, he began to raise it up, as if one of us were leaning out from behind the car to look around. Meanwhile, gunfire rang out from inside the house. Nobody's shooting at us. They're shooting at somebody else, Randy said suddenly. We both got up slowly and looked to see the house lighting up with gunfire from inside. On the roof, a dead toy soldier could be seen with a large hole blown through it. Shit, they better not be. I told them to approach with caution. They're still in training. They could get killed. Randy tossed me the shotgun. Do you know how to use that thing? Not really. Well, you've seen movies. Lock and load, delivery boy. I racked the shotgun, something I had seen in a million movies. Felt pretty good, I'm not gonna lie. Call me delivery man at least, will ya? I'm in my 30s. Never. Come on, let's get in there. Before we could get far, someone emerged from the house. We both took aim and almost fired, but then Randy raised his right hand. Hold fire, that's a friendly. LaDonna? What the hell are you doing here? You called me in, boss. Carrie and Big Joe are in there too. All threats are neutralized. There's no hostage though. And no Stone Man either. You took them all out by yourself? I thought you guys were in training. Well, they're just little toy soldiers. It's not like they're anything scary, she said, crunching another one beneath her boot without a glance, as it tried to sneak up on her from behind. But I'm sure from your position, receiving heavy fire, it must have been quite frightening. We followed her in and discovered she was right about the occupants of the house being gone. The place was empty, aside from all the foot-tall toy soldiers who had been killed, as there were a half dozen of them, including the one on the roof, meaning at least a dozen more were still out there somewhere. And we had seen how deadly they could be. Found this in the office, sir? A very tall man with broad shoulders said to Randy, entering the living room. He was holding a check in his hands with a lot of zeros on it. I could tell even from where I was standing. Good work, Big Joe. Randy took the check and examined it. Of course. Who else in this town wants nothing more than power? And will do nothing to stop it getting it. Don't tell me. He turned the check around to show it to me. My heart froze ice cold in my chest, and I suddenly forgot how to breathe. Quest Bakeries was a known front for the Subterraneans. They sold bread downtown, but nobody actually went there. Mostly because the bread was made of bugs. But also because everyone hates those guys. Still, they paid their rent on time, and no one could ever prove that they were just using the bakery as a front for illegal operations. But almost everyone knew that was the case. Another man entered the room, holding his phone in his hands and covering the receiver. I keep trying the sheriff, but he's not answering. I know, Carrie. He's out helping some tourists out in the... Randy paused, realizing the significance of it suddenly. Forest. He's in the forest with the Subterraneans. What the hell is all this? What the hell are they planning? I get a bad, sinking feeling in my gut. Pulling out my phone, I dialed the sheriff's office. It just rang and rang and rang with no answer. Oh no, they've got Muriel. What? How do you know that? Trust me, this is all to get us back. They're still pissed at us for what happened before. She killed one of their oldest giant millipedes. The thing was basically a god to them. They've been waiting for just the right moment to come for us, and this is it. This is all about getting me and my grandma back for what we did. We all stood silently for a moment before Carrie finally broke the silence by asking, So, are we just gonna stand here? Or are we gonna go save them? When we arrived at the entrance to the forest, I was surprised to see Sheriff Parsons there, along with Muriel and Blarian, the woman who I picked up the tiny toy soldier assassins from. As we approached, one of the same toy soldiers who had just been trying to murder us came out from the trees. Randy saw it around the same time I did, and the two of us ran towards them, screaming at them to run. Clearly, they didn't notice it preparing to attack them.
Look out! One of those little bastards is coming for you!
Randy yelled, drawing his pistol.
Get back! I'm gonna blow its tiny plastic face off! Kill it! Kill it! Kill it!
I heard someone screaming in a shrill voice, and realized it was me. Meanwhile, the toy soldier looked completely passive, staring at us as if we were no threat at all. It had a piece of paper in its hands, not a gun, and it wasn't trying to kill anyone.
Stop! What is the meaning of this?
Blarian shouted, picking up the little soldier and cradling it against herself.
These are my personal guardians. They're not dangerous. They don't do anything unless they are told to do so by their owner.
We skidded to a stop like a couple of stunned cartoon characters, unsure what to say.
But, those things just tried to kill us.
Randy stuttered, still holding his gun.
I even had to sit behind a car like a chump, waiting for backup while these guys had all the fun and got to shoot things.
He hooked his thumb over his shoulder at Carrie, LaDonna, and Big Joe. They shrugged and mumbled a half-hearted apology, looking sheepish.
Sorry, boss. We should have left some of them for you to kill,
Big Joe said, wringing his hands.
We'll be more considerate next time.
How did you not realize that these were part of the Blarian 50? Sheriff Parsons asked Randy, his hands on his hips. You've lived in this town longer than I have, and even I know that these are Blarian's elite handcrafted guardsmen who can be rented out for protection services. But if they have malfunction and try to kill you, all you have to do is call Blarian. Then she'll come right over and fix everything. How did you not think to call her? Randy turned his angry gaze on me. I thought you said Mr. Livingstone sent you to that house. He did, after I picked up the mini assassins from Blarian. Someone must have whispered to them in the driveway when I stopped there, like sending them on a secret mission to kill the heart. I told you not to make any stops, Blarian said. That place was supposed to be your only destination. I was very explicit about that for this precise reason. Muriel came over, wagging her finger.
Now, Jay, how could you kill Blarian's guardians? It isn't their fault some middleman coerced them to kill a mystical wardcaster to steal his...
She raised an eyebrow.
You do have the golden egg, correct?
How do you know any of this? And yes, of course I still have it. It's right... My eyes widened. It was in the backseat of my car. I ran back to grab it and found the glowing egg had reshaped itself once again, forming itself into a sword, which was a perfectly reasonable length. I picked it up and it felt warm but comfortable to the touch. As I was about to turn around, something caught my eye. Looking past the car, into the neighborhood adjacent to the forest, I saw a storm front was rolling in. Huge, dark clouds filled with thunder and lightning that was flashing... green? Strange, but no time to think about that now. Racing back to rejoin the group, I waved the glowing sword over my head. Got it! It was at that exact moment that I noticed the sun was setting. We had been at this all day, and I hadn't bothered to check the time. As I opened my mouth to scream a warning at the others, the ground began to shake. It's getting dark. We need to get out of here, I yelled to the others. We can come back in the morning when those giant millipedes aren't feeding. I wish it were that simple, Parsons said, pointing straight into the forest. It looks like they've tied up Lahart. They're using him as bait.
Not just him, either,
Muriel said, and I noticed the giant stone-skinned man tied up next to him. It was Livingstone. Well, that'll teach him to work with those slimy bastards. But he definitely doesn't deserve to be eaten by a millipede and digested for 100 years. Nobody deserves that shit. I've recalled my soldiers, Blarian said. You'll have them at your disposal. But we need to move now, before the big ones start to come up to feed. Sheriff Parsons drew his gun. Okay, everybody ready? We looked around at each other and nodded. Sheriff Parsons, Randy, Muriel, Big Joe, Carrie, LaDonna, and not to mention Blarian and her mini soldiers were all ready to attack, holding weapons in their hands. Oh, there was also me. On my mark, 3, 2, 1. Charge! At that moment, our small army invaded the forest. Literally, a lot of the tiniest soldiers I'd ever seen were suddenly running alongside us, appearing out of nowhere. I guess they had been hiding in the trees. We were only about 10 yards into the woods when the ground began to break open in places, and the horrifying maws of mutant millipedes started to emerge from the dirt between trees. Within moments, they were crawling everywhere. More and more were coming out of the ground with each passing second. As I raced past the tree, one emerged from behind it and sprung at me, showing its sharp, slimy teeth, its jaws unhinged to attack. I swung the glowing sword in my hand without a thought, only instinct, slicing through its face horizontally and splitting its head down the middle. The cauterized edges of the wound reminded me of the damage a lightsaber would inflict, and I suddenly understood why the Subterraneans wanted this magical item so badly. It was fucking badass. Holy shit, dude, Randy said, stopping in his tracks. He offered me his gun with wide eyes. Trade ya? Nah, I'm good, I said, spinning around to lop off another millipede's head, as his mouth opened wide with sharp teeth bared to bite me. Bastard. He took a few shots with his gun, blasting giant holes in the bodies of the mutant insects. It took me all of 3 seconds to catch on to his attempts at being Tom Sawyer. Man, this gun is so much fun to shoot. Die, 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 you millipede sons of bitches. Hooey! I wouldn't give up this fabulous firearm in a million years. That's right, sir. I'd like to be buried with this gun. Unless you wanted to... Still no. Fine, selfish bastard. We approached the two men tied to chairs, which were secured to trees behind them. They were both shaking their heads desperately, as if telling us not to come any further. Of course, we ignored them. As soon as I took the gag out of Lahart's mouth, he yelled, "Run! It's a trap!" But of course, it was too late. As the last person joined the group, the ground all around us began to move, raising upwards. It took me a second to realize it was a giant net. It had been camouflaged to blend into the ground all around us, covered with dead leaves and dry sticks and grass to make it look like the forest floor. The whole group of us were suddenly lifted up off the ground and trapped in the largest net I'd ever seen. The trap was being pulled up by huge millipedes far off in the forest, out of sight until this moment. A sound of laughter could be heard then, as we struggled against the netting. A group of hooded figures came into view below us, and I realized who was making that laughing noise. Fucking Subterraneans. A tall woman strode into view first. She uncovered her face, dropping down the hood which had shrouded her visage in darkness. Her acolytes surrounded her on all sides, and more of them emerged from the woods by the second. Soon there was a throng of them, at least 50 or more, standing below us and watching us dispassionately. Today is your long-awaited Judgment Day, the tall woman said as we struggled in the netting. You have each proven yourselves to be enemies of the Subterraneans. You have wronged us in so many ways. And so it is fitting that you all brought each other here. We could have never lured you into the woods like this, if not for your affection for each other. Your love for one another is what has doomed you. Now, prepare to suffer and die like the infinitesimal worms. Is she fucking serious right now? Randy said, looking at me. Dude, you're holding a fucking lightsaber. What are you... Now, Jay, use the thing. I suddenly realized what he meant, and that I was holding the exact thing that we needed to get out of this mess. The glowing sword in my hand had been completely overlooked by the Subterraneans, even though they ostensibly knew of its existence. And I was once again reminded of just how dumb they were. Turning the blade in my hand, I sliced through the netting like warm butter, quickly making a hole that miniature soldiers fell out from. I kept cutting, and pretty soon gravity did the rest, sending the group of us tumbling out from the net. The group of us stood to our feet, looking the trembling Subterraneans dead in the eyes. Oh, hell, the tall woman said, turning around and running quickly in the opposite direction. Her acolytes followed after her, looking over their shoulders at us to see if we would follow them. And we didn't. This merely left us with the problem of roughly 100 giant millipedes, with more joining them by the second, who were rapidly surrounding us to feast on our still-living corpses. What now? I asked, looking at Sheriff Parsons. Can't take all these things. How about just us? Good thing it isn't just us, he said, winking at me. The ground was suddenly trembling again, and I wondered if it was more millipedes rising to the surface. It turned out it wasn't. I called for backup. Who? Randy asked. The recruits are already here. I saw then who he had called for help. Entering the forest, raising their voices in a war cry, was the entire town of Hollow's End. Every citizen, ranging from aliens to monsters to humans, and everything in between. Mark from Earth, Mama Kato, Frank, Diane Showers, and the Crimson Muse. With the Butcher leading them at the head of the front line, they were mowing down millipedes and hacking them to pieces as the creatures lunged and attacked. The huge, many-legged monsters were not allowing these intruders into the forest without a fight. They were attacking them without mercy. But the citizens of Hollow's End had been through this before.
What am I listening to right now?
It wasn't the first time they'd had to fight to preserve the safety of their town.
I was listening to,
and it wasn't the first time they had to call the denizens of the forest.
But this one isn't so much a creepypasta. I think at this point it's just like
for us to escape,
this dude just came into the algorithm type of deal.
We made our way towards them to get away. It wasn't easy, as the monsters were now everywhere. And
Hold on. Let's see the title of this thing.
Second. As a rule of thumb,
it says, I'm a delivery man for monsters.
The bigger the monsters were,
we have a list of rules from this guy called Jordan Group Horror. Apparently he's also like a creepypasta
I saw many
like
of the
reader.
Get crushed by the onslaught of enormous millipedes.
Yeah.
But others put up a
this
hell of a
doesn't
fight.
sound that creepy.
One small squadron of them saving me from an attack at the last second. That would have
I'm
likely
just
taken out my
clicking
throat,
up random shit
as
that
the size of a Rottweiler nearly tackled me. Within a few minutes,
the stuff that shows up in like the recommended after a video ends.
Of others were waiting. I was leading the charge, slicing the creatures from stem to stern and leaving cauterized pieces of flesh and pools of green slimy blood in my wake. As we got within reach of the others, suddenly something huge emerged from the ground, blocking our path and sending me flying up into the air, sailing into the branches of the trees above. The wind was knocked out of me, and it took me a few seconds to realize what had just happened. I was now way up in the air, above the tops of the highest trees, hanging precariously from the face of the biggest millipede I'd seen in quite some time.
Well, I just finally got the 10 feathers.
And it was maneuvering its mouth to try to float me inside like a dangling cheese curd on some problematic poutine.
Yeah.
A blur of gray streaked past me to my right, and I saw it was Mr. Livingstone. He was climbing up the body of the millipede with the speed and grace of a spider. I wouldn't have thought he was capable of that, considering his size, and the fact that he was made of stone. The giant millipede apparently didn't notice him at first, as it was focused on me, its potential dinner. But as Livingstone reached the creature's face and began to bash it with his fists, he became more of an apparent threat. The monster reeled backwards, thrashing and bucking to get the interloper off, but Livingstone held firmly onto it, digging his rocky hands into the flesh of the creature and tearing off its scales, leaving gooey green cheese strands behind. Finally, Livingstone managed to grab hold of me and raked his stony hand down the belly of the beast, slowing our descent as we came crashing back down to the ground. It wasn't a graceful landing, but I survived the fall, and Livingstone looked somewhat pleased at that fact. Thanks, big guy, I said, shaking as I got up from my knees. You saved my life.
It was the least I could do, Livingstone replied. I still have a long way to go to make up for my mistakes today, but I hope this is a start. I should have never trusted those subterranean pieces of shit. I hope one day you can forgive me for that.
The ground was splitting beneath our feet, and we all shuffled and ran to get out of the way. Let's save the apology party for after we're out of the death forest, shall we? Randy said, waving us all towards the clearing. We managed to escape the forest, thanks to the help of nearly everyone in town. The millipedes knew better than to advance beyond the borders of the woods, and didn't follow us much further. Those who did were cut down quickly and without mercy. To stay alive, they needed to stay together, and that meant staying within the boundaries of the forest. As we all stood in the field outside the woods, covered in mud and blood and counting our losses, I looked up again to see the storm clouds which were rolling into town. The clouds were moving so slowly, and that lightning flashing green like the Incredible Hulk. Well, I would say we hit the subterraneans now while they're at their weakest, Sheriff Parsons said, looking at the sky. But I'm starting to think we've got other problems right now. What the hell is up with that cloud? It don't look right, Randy muttered.
Thank you for returning this to me safely,
a voice said from behind me, and I turned to see Lahart was there, with his hand extended.
I owe you a debt of thanks.
I realized he wanted the glowing egg thing, which was now a glowing sword. Sad to part with it, I began to hand it over to him, but then stopped. Wait a second. You owe me more than a debt of gratitude. You said you'd give me $500 for keeping it safe and bringing it back to you. Cough up the cash, man. I've been through hell for this thing. Yeah, Randy said, backing me up. And I get 10%. No, I corrected. You already get free liquor deliveries, remember? Oh, yeah. Lahart looked worried.
I, don't have that sort of cash on me. That's a lot of money, and...
I took the sword back, keeping it in my possession. No payment? No problem. I'll just hang on to this for collateral, until you can get it to me. He started arguing, but then a loud murmuring sound began to rise up from the townspeople all around us. The green-tinged cloud was nearly overhead, and it was just beginning to rain. As the raindrops hit the ground, strange things began to burst from the soil. Plants that looked alive and hungry. Screams erupted from everywhere, and a mad panic overtook the crowd as people began to jostle and push each other. And then, a stampede broke out. It had been a long day in Hollow's End. But, as it turned out, it wasn't over yet. Alright, everybody. That's it for this installment of Hollow's End. I hope you all will join us next time. We'll find out what happens next. There's a few people I'd like to thank for making this possible today. Mark from Earth, Crimson Muse, Joy Burton, Diane Showers, Mark Zwall, Cheryl James, Pick Your Sticker, Teddy Dog, Clue 404, Mama Cotto, Dante Kincaid, Zarin Ray, Angela Donovan, Blarian 50, Devin Kyle, Timothy Baird, Ajeti, Bert Turner, Bajani Espinal, Michael Pierce, Big Joe, Carrie Harkonnen, LaDonna Spivey, they're the new recruits, Scott Tanaka, Tom Stewart, Sherman Davis, Bryce Shelton, Susan McClendon, Elise Batiste, Lisa in the Cult Jam, Open Circuit, Fabulavore, Raymond Jaggers, That Darn Fox, Raison Detra, Kai Gaming 99, Wendy Burns, The Wendigo, Michael Squishy Park, The Jamstar, Vault 77 Citizen, Puppy Dan, Clovis Wolf, Eldridge Elm and Derek Prey, Elder Bean and Casey Hawaii, Rob T, Tragic Mermaid, Darren Fishnauer, Cloves Noah Harris, Roe Underwood, Florida Man Luke, Bethany's Mom, Winter's Kiss, Sam Brook, The White Stag and Corgi Connection, No Name, Marta Cara, Professor Elm and Kathy Barrickman, Cybard Sands, Steve Hennessy, Melanie Sanders, The Archivist, Rob Smith and Term 4, Naz Razio, J. David Wellman Jr., Parker Lewis, Monica Moya, D-Master 311, Britt the Alchemist, Taylor the Fox, and Holly Haworth. If you want to become a citizen of Hollow's End like these folks and appear in a story in the future, well, head on over to patreon.com/Jordan Group Horror. Thanks everybody for listening to tonight's story. If you want to hear the origins of Jay the Delivery Guy, well, click on a little link in the bottom right hand corner that's going to be coming up on your screen in a moment. Alright, that's it for today. Thanks everybody. Hope you have a great night.
Greetings. Goodbye. May the eternal
I want your soul.
Grandpa Henry was a reclusive man. He didn't just like being left alone. He hated people with a burning passion, something I'm sure was greatly responsible for his ruthless business practices that helped him turn his father's wealth into an eye-popping fortune. Society returned the favor, and he'd turned into an angry, friendless man by the time retirement came calling. Out of work, out of people who gave a shit, and stuck in an increasingly loveless marriage, he became more and more like Ebenezer Scrooge as time went by. After Grandma Nancy passed away, he decided he had had enough of humanity and retreated to his large manor out in the wilderness, away from the prying eyes of his mostly greedy family, rival capitalists and intrusive journalists, fully embracing the hermit lifestyle. Unlike Mr. Scrooge, there was no one around for miles to try and melt his frigid heart, and he died as he lived, cold and alone. It had been well over a decade since I'd last seen him. Hell, I was still in high school at that time, and my parents dragged me into his palatial house and forced me to smile and deal with his loathsome attitude. He grumbled, picked faults with every little thing my mom did, and went on bizarre, bigoted rants. It was very unpleasant. I only realized this morning when I was packing my bags that it was the last time I ever got to meet with him. I couldn't work myself up to tears, but I did feel some semblance of guilt welling within me for completely ignoring him. It was my dad who told me about his passing. Everybody wanted a slice of the pie that Grandpa Henry was going to serve after he died, and my father was no different, being barely able to contain his glee when he invited me to attend his funeral, and more interestingly, the reading of his will later on that evening. I had made up my mind to skip the whole thing as I had a very important meeting on the day of the funeral, but mostly because I wanted to avoid the inheritance-related family drama that was bound to follow the reading of the will. My girlfriend Allison was the one who made me change my plans, fascinated as she was with the prospect of visiting a Victorian-style manor. "So, is it as beautiful and romantic as you had imagined?" I asked as I drove up the winding road, the tires kicking up dust as they crushed the gravel underneath. She grinned. "It's better." It truly was a beautiful sight, undulating hills covered in grass that curved and warped as frosty winds danced on them, rolling hills that surrounded the summit on which Grandpa Henry had built his little palace. I slowed down as we came closer to our destination, taking the time to properly drink in the view. Towering turrets that thrust up into the bright moonlit sky like spears of ancient warriors, arched glass windows proudly looking down upon the well-maintained garden, enclosed by a sturdy wall that finished its circumscribing journey on a wrought iron gate. It was a place that stood the test of time, maintaining its dignity and poise throughout. Snow-capped peaks that were barely visible at this time of night dotted the distant landscape behind the imposing manor, completing the picturesque scenery. "Oh my God," Allison giggled, "your grandfather even had a butler." And yes, he did. Frank was the only person in the world who could tolerate Grandpa's surly and entitled attitude without devolving into its fits of uncontrollable rage. Or at least that's what I heard. He fiddled with the buttons of his black suit, and then brought his gloved hand out to open Allison's door when I brought the car to a halt. "Good evening, ma'am," he greeted her warmly before turning to me. "Good evening, sir. Please head to the living room up ahead. Everyone is waiting for you." I shivered as the cold air stabbed at my skin. Are we really the last to arrive? Fuck. I could hear the murmuring as I hopped the short stairs to the front door. The chattering instantly stopped as I soundlessly pushed the door open, and more than a dozen heads swung in our direction. Wood crackled and burned in the fireplace, desperately trying to sweep aside the awkward silence with its dying embers. I held the door open, allowing Allison to walk before me, who smiled and thanked me. "Well, well, well. Looks like the prodigal son has arrived. Finally decided to join us vultures, have you? To see what dear father left for you?" "Yeah, it's good to see you too, Uncle Freddy," I greeted the blond, balding man wearing a bright red sweater. My father's younger brother was as caustic as ever. "Cut it out, Freddy," my mom said as she came in and gave me a hug before helping us put our coats away. I shook my dad's hand, waved at my sister and her husband, and then went and sat on one of the empty couches, pulling Allison close into me. "Can we please get started with what we came
I
here
kind of
for?"
fucked up there.
Uncle Freddy asked, clearly annoyed.
So
Jonathan, he looked
I
at a man in
needed
a gray
to
suit and
channel
nodded
that.
instead.
I thought I had to
"Good evening,
pray or
everyone,"
something or some
he
shit.
said as he stood near the fireplace.
That was
such
for
all eyes in the
decoy
spacious room
totem.
were on
I don't know if that's like an air totem
I
or
am
some
Henry's
shit.
lawyer, here to tell you the
Decoy
terms of
totem
his
10
will.
second. I mean,
I'll
it's
keep
not
it
a big
simple
thing,
since
but I
it's
feel like
best
maybe
to
that
not
could
waste
help for
time.
something big. Like, could I
$300
decoy
million,
totem like
he
the
continued.
claw from
That is the sum total
one
of Henry's
dude?
movable and immovable assets, and that is what is at stake here tonight.
Yeah.
Holy shit! I thought that is a fucking shitload of money.
So, in
Way
about
more than
2
what I was
hours and a
expecting
half,
to
I'll
hear.
be
And if
with
the
like this
furious
one
whispers
guild
around
group,
me
or
weren't
I don't know if
gonna
they're a
go
guild
by,
group that
I wasn't
looked like
the
they
only
were
one
looking for
feeling
more
this way.
people
Jonathan
for
cleared his throat and
Gnomer.
the room went silent
They've got
again.
6 out of 6,
Now,
so
As is
experience.
written
So
in the will,
yeah,
all of that money
probably
will go to the
go
winner
do
of the
that.
inheritance game.
There's like
And the
2
dual
runes. Like I
participating
was
tonight.
literally just trying to do that, but I
The
just
what?
wasted the last half an hour because I fucked that up.
What does it mean?
Like I
by
fucked
this?
that
Is
up
this a
like
joke?
really
The
good.
voices rose with everyone shouting.
We
to
should
make
have got it
themselves
right
heard
there,
over
but
the
I
game, which in
like
turn
interrupted
added
that
on.
channel to like do a
Increasingly
kneel or
sounding like the
pray or
buzzing
some
of a
shit
giant
like that.
nest of bees that
So,
someone
yeah.
had chucked a stone at.
Fucked it up.
Jonathan tried to get
Fucked
them
it
to
up
quiet down, but
real
no one bothered
good.
to listen. So he threw his hands up in frustration and walked
But
out.
yeah, it's just that, and then
When he
there's
came
like
back into the
a
room, he
healing
was
kind
flanked
of
by 2
rune. I
men
guess
wearing
these are like the
blood
feet
masks and
rune
carrying
things I'm
12
going
gauge
for.
pump-action shotguns.
I've got only feet,
A sudden,
Spirit of the
fearful
Alpha for
silence
my
fell upon
feet.
the
I've
room
got all
like a
the
thick,
waist
suffocating crowd as
runes.
people tried to make sense of
Maelstrom
this
is
strange
like
sight.
this.
Now,
Definitely.
I'm gonna explain the rules of the inheritance game to you. Please don't interrupt me. I'll take any questions you have after I'm
But
done speaking.
I'll probably do
Jonathan
some
said
BFD
authoritatively.
like off stream on my
Your
alts while
family
I
is a
kind of
little
wait
bit
for
weird.
this.
Allison chuckled nervously, and I held
This
her hand
guild
tightly
to like
in a
raid
reassuring
because
manner.
that's at like 8
Jonathan began explaining
PM,
the rules of
or
the game,
was
and
it
everyone
6?
listened in a shocked silence.
Kind of forget.
Barring a few gasps and some "oh my gods" here, and some smug, disbelieving snorts there.
When
I'll
again
transcribe the
did
rules
you
to you as best
say
as I remember
this
them.
raid happens?
Rule number 1. Everyone sitting in the room
Oh,
plays
shit,
the game,
he's AFK.
regardless of their age. Rule number 2. To win, survive until the crack of dawn at 6 a.m. The inheritance money will be split equally among all those who survive. Rule number 3. Escaping or attacking the administrators will result in immediate disqualification and on-the-spot execution. Intentionally damaging the cameras will result in the same. Rule number 4. At least one less than half the players must die. If that doesn't happen by the morning,
Alright.
everyone will be executed and the money goes to the board of directors of the company.
So
Rule
yeah,
number
at
5.
8.
Each murder costs $10 million.
Alright.
For each person you directly kill, you
Just gonna do
lose $10
BFD
million
like on
of your
3 of my
share
alts.
of the inheritance money.
And
Rule number 6. Weapons can be bought
yeah,
from the inventory
let's
shack
do
from
that.
the swimming pool in the backyard.
And I'll be
using
back
the
in like
inheritance
2.5 hours, I guess.
Caution.
For
If the amount
Gnomer
of money
raid.
you've spent or lost exceeds the
That
share
would-
of the inheritance
That
money
would have been
you'll
like
receive
another
if you
rune right
survive,
there, but I mean, I
then
don't
you
think I
too
really need it.
shall be